I'd like to call this meeting to order. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning.
How are you, Bruce?
Good. All right, I think we had a request last night for some further review of one of the policies on the consent agenda. So, Arnold, do you want to make that motion to pull that off of consent?
Dave, can you find it here?
What I
Item
It's
3.03.
So if we just pull off that,
Making a motion, we amend the agenda to exclude item 3.03.
Can we do just that policy JGK5?
Yes, just JGK5.
Okay.
second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I need a motion to approve the agenda as amended, please.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. All right. First up, results of communication survey. Okay.
You have the full results, and then I did some highlights for you. Overall, the district looked pretty good. The results are similar to what you heard about last time. We had 77.2% of respondents giving us a 4 or a 5 on a scale of 1 to 5. 51% agreed that over the past several years, the quality of the schools here has improved. And then I have put the comparison with last year on when we can. Some of the questions were different, so where we could, we put them in. Those who participated in the survey follow the district pretty closely. We had 43.2% who said somewhat and 50.4% who said very. And last year the numbers were similar. 48.5% said the district has kept them very informed about its financial situation. 21.1% said somewhat informed. And that compares to last year when 10% reported the district kept them informed about its financial situation. 57.9% said somewhat informed. Not surprisingly, respondents are most interested in curriculum, rationales for decision-making, information about the district's performance compared to other districts, as well as budget and finance information, which is also very similar to last year's and several years over the past. The best ways to provide information was email, Facebook, and the Times. The website was about a third of those, and the district newsletter was a little bit less. Last year, preferred means were Facebook, website, newsletter, and the Times. So, pretty much the same. The preferred means of gathering information are surveys, 83%, email, 76.5%, social media, 29.4%, and meetings/impromptu conversations at 21.8%. This year we asked about Let's Talk, and you will be happy to know participants appreciate the board's outreach. 63.6% rated the sessions a 4 or 5 on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being very important. Majority prefer the St. Louis Bread Company location. 50% would like a weekday evening. So that might be something you want to think about. 19.5% choosing a weekend morning. There were comments that some hadn't heard about it, so that will give us something to work with in the coming year. Most people say they have adequate opportunities to express concerns and opinions. And 51.2% said they had adequate opportunities to contribute to decisions made in the district. 25.2% disagreed, and 23.6% had no opinion. 73% thought we spent our tax dollars very or somewhat efficiently. And then we asked where we should focus tax dollars, and you'll have all the details in the full printout of the survey. They were kind of all over the place, but we did have 51 people chose teachers, and that could be teacher salaries or teacher resources, just different means of finishing teachers. 34 chose facilities, which would include maintenance, renovations, new construction, safety, and security. 31 selected curriculum. 13 said technology, and everything else was in single digits. Next steps. we should probably do more surveys, and there's some refinements to this one that we might want to consider. We can focus our communications goals on sharing information about curriculum and programs, increase publicity for Let's Talk, and continue talking about rationales for decisions made, stories about improving the quality of education, and using lots of media to promote our story.
So this is just, obviously, this morning it's all about discussions and
Yeah.
just kind of, you've had a chance to look these over summary-wise and
And there's more
Stuff
in
like
the
that.
full survey, and there's lots of comments. There was some open-ended questions you might want to take a look at.
How many people, do you remember how many people completed the survey last year?
Yes, it was 704.
it was about 3 or 4 last.
So there were a
About
few
the same
more,
number.
and
Yeah.
I think that another thing, we would like to see more people participate. I thought we'd get an increase, we got a little increase. But not significant.
We did at the end of
And
the
we-
data, you'll see we did something where we just kind of broke down the, the information for a couple of the questions based on,
Right.
how they classified themselves. Do they have children in the district?
Right.
Had they had private school, anything like that? So we did that with the, how do you rate the district 1 to 5? And what do you see about the quality of schools improving over the past few years?
And there was some slippage in the positive responses compared to last year. Don't know why, so take another year to see if it's a trend or whether that was just
Yeah.
an anomaly.
Yeah. I think one of the things too for me, and I'll be quiet and listen here, is just also in terms of communication and some of these things with rationale. Can never do it enough, but I think just how can we be better in all aspects, not just at a district level, but at the school level of, we want to, being explicit that we're doing this to hear from you. We're doing this because we want for you to share, to contribute to different decisions, to ask questions. So I think there are different ways that sometimes we'll do it, but we won't tell them, we're doing this because, and come back to the rationale. Because having a rationale is important, or because hearing your voice is important. I feel like that could be a broken record that we do a better job with.
We did have this reviewed by key communicators more than once.
Yeah.
Before we put it out, and
Yeah.
thanks to them.
Yeah.
I think it's some good ideas.
Mhm.
Comments, questions?
Yeah, I guess I would kind of want to, a little bit, dig a little more on, as it relates to some of the things like on the, I'm just take this for example, like the Let's Talk thing, where there were several comments, more than several comments about people who didn't even know it existed.
Right. Which I can't figure that out. I mean, I feel like we, sorry not to interrupt
No,
you,
no,
but
no.
the fact that people don't know about that makes me wonder what else they don't know about, because I feel like we did a pretty good job of putting that up on the billboard and putting it in the paper, and, I mean, obviously we didn't do a good enough job, but,
Well, and it makes me wonder, and not linking a couple of comments together, but when information, there were several comments about the website. There were several comments about communication, I don't know, either between this office and buildings or within a building and with the principal and PTO and parents and things like that, and teachers. And whether there's a breakdown in information that gets put on the master calendar, because I missed a couple things at, I'm just taking an example, of Ambrose. And I think if things are put on like an Ambrose calendar and they're not put on the district calendar, it doesn't show up on a district feed. If it's put on the district calendar, it shows up on a building feed. I don't know the dynamics of that, but things that are on a calendar, especially if they're district things, they really need to be on building calendars as it relates to, I think, board functions if we're doing something like that. And I don't know how much those are publicized at the building level to parents then, because I know parents pay a lot of attention, which links into getting over information like phone calls of
yeah.
those kinds of things. So it's kind of a, how are we actually disseminating the information, and what kind of information are we pushing through, like those text or phone call things, and what information are we pushing through to parent newsletters and those, that's what the questions kind of I have. And what are we going to do about that?
And I mean, just anecdotally, I know the Let's Talk thing was, I had a kid at Clark, and it was on their billboard outside front school, it was in their newsletter,
Mhm.
you know, and I often miss things, but that one I felt like would have been hard to miss, so I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that the people who did attend, Pat, found it worthwhile.
Yeah, in regard to the calendar, that's an ongoing goal, because the way, and I don't know if it's gonna change with our new, because we are having a
I am
new
going to jump
website.
in there because the Ambrose calendar and the district calendar have been a little arm wrestling going on there. Because they would change and then we wouldn't. So
Okay.
just know that the new website, which is almost ready to go, resolves that.
New district
Because they're-
website?
Yes, they're giving up, my understanding is that's going to be controlled and we're not going to have a Google Calendar here and then something else over here. Because we keep hearing that and they've got to stop. And they will stop.
And one of the things is, so we collaborate as an administration on a Google shared calendar to put all of our dates, whether it's PTO, whether it's community events at schools, whatever, and we look for like conflicts to try and, like, if there's a middle school band performance and a high school band performance, we say, okay, somebody's got to move. Who's going to move? Then ultimately, this is where our process has been for as long as I've been here. And then what happens is once we reach an end, then it goes to Adrian in Bruce's office, and it gets put on the main district calendar. The expectation, which has gotten better, but it's not perfect, is that if you're going to change your PTO meeting, you can't just communicate it with your PTO in Hudson. You need to communicate it with Adrian, because not just for other people's awareness of that meeting, but she also manages all the like evening use of premise things. You know, and so sometimes there's a conflict because it's like, okay, this school rescheduled their band performance because the teacher was sick, but Hoopsters has the gym that night. So then, you know, and it's not good for us to have to call Hoopsters last minute and say, sorry. So it's something that we've improved upon, but a problem that still exists. But I do think too, because that was some of the feedback too, is because I do think we have to hit people with communication in a lot of different ways, but there are certainly at least a decent little segment of the population that's like, you're blasting me for everything, you know?
How do I do this? Anybody?
Press the speak, should be a speaker.
There's an answer button. There it is, I got it.
Thank you, sorry. David?
Yes.
Hi.
You good with that?
Yeah, we're good. We're discussing the results of the communication survey.
Okay, all right, I will put it on, I'll keep it on mute.
Okay,
Sorry for the light.
it's okay. I'm sorry, what were you?
So that was just kind of what, you know, we don't have anything right now that says, I don't think, obviously I don't know about it, blast for this, don't blast for this, you know, because some people, you know, like some schools will do a weekly blast, like a lot of our elementary schools, it seems, are doing a weekly blast. Did the high school do a weekly blast?
No.
No.
And some reserve
That's something
it
we could do.
for emergencies. So
Yeah.
there's sort of a divided
Yeah.
opinion on how to use the phone stuff. But yeah, there was too much communications was actually one of the categories that got several marks. Too much, because their phones are all ringing and it's something they already knew and that kind of thing.
And we tell people too, there's a feeling like some people get frustrated because it comes across as anonymous, but that's usually what Bill Kay has said, it's an AT&T thing. So people will get frustrated that they get a call from the school, whether it's a blast or the teacher, and it comes across as anonymous. But then some people, you have to go in as a user, and we've communicated this, again, we could probably do it more frequently, that if you just want to get the emergency, right?
Right.
Just want to get the emergency calls, then you could just get the emergency calls. Because you could select emergency, non-emergency, like school day, not school day, but you as the end
How
user,
do you do that?
you have to self-select it. How do you,
It's on the website somewhere, I think, in the quick, School Messenger is one of the quick choices at the top. They
Yeah.
don't know that either, but yeah, we had it on the main page for quite a while, where you could go in and make your choices.
Is that something that could be perhaps printed out and included in the big packet that everybody gets at the beginning of the school year when you got to sign off on this and sign off on that? Is that something that could be included? So
Like a
they
mini
have
tutorial kind of
Yeah,
thing?
so they have a hard copy and, I mean, at
Do you
that
have
point it's up
anything
to
like
them to
that,
read.
John,
but-
anywhere?
That'd be an interesting thing too at open house, just to remind people that they can do
Well,
that.
you can
Here's the
select-
information for that, to do that.
And you can select if you want it on your cell phone, your home phone, your email.
And is there a choice between text and phone? Because that seemed to be an issue
Yeah.
too, that people were, just send me a text.
Yeah.
I think I was getting all three, but that's because I didn't know that I could.
I was too. I was getting
like,
voicemails to my text. Kathy, do you remember on
The
that?
text is just a
I
voice
feel like I've heard
so
a
it's not
response.
really a text,
Yeah.
because you still have to listen to it.
Well, I would get a text saying, like, when school was closed, it would say, no school today. It was just a text message.
I signed up and never got anything.
Oh, yeah. We'll put something together that has all that. We'll communicate it to you, communicate it to the families at the start of the year, and then an open
I
house.
think that's what creates some frustration is, and maybe people sign up for the system and can't,
Yeah.
dial it in and
I think I signed up as well, and I don't think I ever remember getting any communications at all.
Do you sign up just for, because,
But this is way back when it was first introduced.
okay,
and
when Katie was here.
Or however long that option was, whenever that was. It might have been, we may have had a different system since she's been gone, so, it was just, general option versus a particular school.
Yeah, School Messenger's our second, so, we get something else before.
Yeah.
and is there belabor points, is there a protocol for like what should be sent out and what shouldn't be sent out? And because, if a teacher does that and then a building principal does that and another teacher does that another day and people are working and, you get a call from school, you think something's going on. Nowadays,
Yeah.
at least that's my thought.
Was there anywhere where there's a calendar where you can see every school once?
Well, the district
Yeah,
calendar
the district
has,
calendar.
But I feel like it doesn't have like blacktop ball in it or chili
PTO
festival probably
events, you
does.
mean?
Yeah, like all the little stuff.
And that's, it's supposed to, like I just clicked on May 11th, I got Clark Field Day, Hudson Field Day, Professional Day, Avery Razzmatazz, High School Acapella.
Sounds like a lot.
It's supposed to be that
It should have
calendar.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody just called me because they couldn't find the high school calendar for this coming up year with all the dates on it.
Okay.
She can fix that.
It was right. She was actually looking like, do you know where it is?
Yeah. Yeah, so I do think, I will be curious. So you can also go on our app, and if you wanted to, the calendar is there, but the new website is going to be much more app-friendly. But it should be on this calendar. Now, Adrian has to go through, and Bruce, do you know where she is with? Next year hasn't been uploaded on this calendar, but she may be working on the new calendar.
I think it's open. I think the new calendar's open.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just can't get to it from our website yet.
We're kind of in limbo now too, because
Yeah.
the old site is up,
Right.
right, and the new one's over here hidden, and it's got all the updates. So at some point, that one's gonna vanish, we hope, before school starts.
Yeah.
Are we gonna let people know that?
With your calendar too, like sometimes.
Because there's nothing worse than logging on, and now there's a new website, and it's like, okay, now how do I navigate this deal?
Yeah,
Like
we-
Desi did
I know.
down near in the middle of the year.
Yeah.
Can you set it up so that it'll sync with your calendar on your phone?
Yes, RSS feed will do that, at least
Yeah.
it did on mine.
Yeah.
But you have to, the info has to be there.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So will there
We
be
can do that.
communication
Yeah.
about the new website?
Yeah,
and-
yeah.
I don't know if it's possible either, but for example, for those who have multiple children, but it's like Clark Hickson High School, if you wanted to, if you were calendar, if you had the drop down that says, click on the calendars that you want to see and leave the ones unchecked that you don't, so that way if you don't have a child at Avery or Bristol or Hudson, but you want to see 3 calendars together, then you can click those and it only shows those events. I don't know if that's the way.
The
it was
app has
pro-
that.
The app has that?
Really
Okay.
nice.
I didn't know what the new one,
Yeah.
the
Sure,
the
we could even
structure
do
of
a
that.
quick video tutorial, just make,
Pop it up on the Facebook
on
site.
on the, and just this is the
That'd be
basics of how to navigate the,
Right.
Yeah, because that can be sent out as almost like a YouTube link,
exactly.
and that could be included in newsletters or, an email or even a text
Yeah.
that says, hey, if you want to see the new website that's being rolled out,
Or
click on
even when you
here.
go to the homepage, this looks different.
Right.
Click this link for, what's changed, how to navigate. et cetera.
Yeah, that's good.
When will that go live?
Yeah, sure.
Still working on it.
Soon, no. There's still questions, let's put it that.
It looks really.
It looks great, though.
really-
Yeah.
So,
Pat-
like,
Pat Weaver's put a lot of work into it. It looks
Months,
great.
days, weeks.
I don't have a date, I'm
I'd say
sorry.
weeks, probably.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Before school starts?
I think
That's
that's
the
the goal,
intention.
yeah, because teachers will come back, and even right now, they're loading they're moving their sites this summer, so we want to open it as complete as possible, so I know that Tim just sent a memo encouraging teachers to get in and do it.
Can I ask another question about the Let's Talk? In
Yeah.
what ways did you communicate the survey that you might have communicated Let's Talk differently? Like, how did we get,
Get a response that said they didn't know about
Right.
it, but they knew about the survey.
right,
We use the same,
the same channels?
yeah, we use all the free things we have, which is, the website and Facebook and Twitter, and the times when they'll run a news release for us, and we have put it in, and we did buy ads a couple times for Let's Talk.
One thing that
School
we,
newsletters, school marquees.
the only thing that we didn't do every time is blast out an email from the school district. I think otherwise.
But the principals
every
were
time-
supposed
the
to put it
principals
in
did.
their
Yes, I got it
newsletters.
from Bristol, absolutely.
Right, we didn't do
But
it,
we
but
didn't
they were
blast out
supposed to.
something. That was the
Now,
only thing.
maybe
that was-
some of them were better at doing that than others. And that's just parents, the outside community, that's a whole other,
Right.
Yeah.
more difficult to reach.
Yeah. But that's one thing that I, didn't do yet, is we can go back and using that same criteria was there a segment of the population? We could check the respondents for the families who don't have kids here versus the families who have kids here. That would kind of give us some more
Yeah.
information
I think
as
that'd be
to.
interesting.
we
Do
can
we
that.
put it on the marquee out here?
We do.
You do?
Mhm.
And is it well attended?
No.
So,
I
and,
mean, I can't
No.
I can't say that strongly enough. No, like, literally Pat has been
Last time
often
there was
the only
not a
one
single
there,
person.
or there's no one there.
I liked
Go ahead.
knowing that there was
I'm sorry,
visibility.
No, it's all right.
It's not my place, it's not my place to speak at this particular meeting, but I'm wondering, what was the goal in setting up those meetings initially? And then what steps were taken to assure that that goal would be met?
Well, I think you guys,
And there was really no district-wide communication, in my humble opinion, there was no district-wide communication that the board wants to hear from its public. One of the ways it's going to do this is it's going to set up a series of meetings and invites the public to come in and talk to them. Now, I
well,
would think,
that was exactly the goal, and I know that I said that multiple times in meetings, we discussed that as being the goal. Now, I don't know if maybe the headline, "Let's Talk," obviously doesn't convey all of that, but
Actually, I think the several times when I saw the information about the Let's Talk, it said almost exactly those same words.
that was exactly the-
That we want to hear from you, and this is an
I'm
opportunity to come.
talking, Steve and Amy, about a preliminary type of communication that says, maybe in the Webster Kirkwood Times, maybe an article that says, one of the things that we've realized as a board is that we want to hear more from our community. I know why you do, and that's because of the defeat of S&W in 2015. You want to have a better line into your community. But nobody knew that, in my opinion, about the Let's Talk meetings. I mean, I know you discussed it in the board meetings. I know you put ads in, but obviously that wasn't communicating to the community. That wasn't enough. It didn't work. So the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Maybe Let's Talk isn't the way. Maybe people would rather have forums or something else. I don't know. You're right. I went because I was interested.
I'd have to go back and look and see what original communications are. And I don't know the number of people who said that they didn't know about it. I have to go back and look at that number.
And maybe it's too unstructured, and maybe people don't know what they're coming to. You know, maybe if there was a topic.
That's a good point, because the other thing too is, I think the time, it looked like people would rather see more weekday
Yeah, I
evenings.
think that was, I took that away
Yeah.
from this too.
Yeah.
And I think even if you intend to go, all of a sudden it's Sunday at whatever time and you're doing other things and
Right.
you don't remember it. Yeah.
And maybe a topic, and then a change of time, and then revisiting how that's laid out for people to get that information.
Well, I certainly think, I mean, I guess we do need to decide whether we want to continue to do this in its current format, if we want to do something different. But whatever we decide to do, we should probably, or we should definitely, at the start of the year, provide the context and the explanation for everybody as to what it is and why we're doing it. And I'm going to sort of get off the subject a little bit because this discussion might converge here. But when I look at a lot of the comments in the survey, some of them, well, first of all, I'm surprised. Some of them are just mistaken. They're claiming things that I don't believe to be accurate.
Yeah.
The question being, what do we do to? I know we don't know who made these comments, but how do we respond to some of the things that are said in here? How do we address the misconceptions that are out there? And like a few of them, one of them is they'll be saying the exact opposite. Like the district is great because of this, and then somebody else is terrible because of this. And I know that's just, there's not a lot we can do about some of that, but I hope I think there needs to be, maybe my question is really for you all in administration. What do you take from these comments as this is something we need to follow up on and do a better job of?
Well, I think some of the things, Kathy listed, we've been, and truth be told, we closed this survey about 2 weeks ago, and not all of us, this is the first time we've all been here and been in the room together. So we haven't had a chance to dialogue on all of them together yet. What we do right now is we certainly respond to anybody's individual inquiry or question, or whether it's emailed or whether it's put to us face to face. We monitor Community Connect, Alt Connect, and stuff like that. And if there's something that has communication department, having a superintendent, one communication person, and a director of technology managing to respond to every single thing that comes up, every misrepresentation, it's not doable. So what we do is we look to see, are there multiple people that have this misperception, or and then if so, or we feel a need, then we go onto our current Facebook site and we kind of post the truth there, and then we push it out to people to push it into those particular forums. But yeah, there's definitely some stuff in here that's, you've got totally polar opposite opinions. You've got this truth that's in here. I don't,
But a lot of those are perceptions, maybe? Because
Yeah.
if you have the same topic and people are on two different ends of the polarity on that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's their perception of what's,
True.
and maybe it's too much information, not enough information, or, I don't know.
yeah.
So
And
I
it's just
think
how much
there-
time and energy and thought you put into, and again, you want everybody to have a right perception, but to a single perception.
I think there's also a tendency at times to
You know,
focus
you're
on
communicating.
one or two comments that, quite frankly, I almost want to, without being crass about it, I mean, that I want to dismiss just simply because it's like, once a month seems too frequent, maybe twice a year. 2 comments later, you're going to have, why aren't you having them on this day and that day? Because not everybody can make those 2 times a year. So you got 2 people on the opposite side saying one's too much, one's too little.
Right.
And I want to say to the people that Lex talk, it's like, well, okay, we have about 8 different ways that you've responded. 1, 2, 3, 4, actually 7 different ways that people respond that how they get their information from us. The least of which is Twitter. Okay. Well, you're talking about. No offense, I'm an older person. I don't do Twitter. Okay. So it could have been on Twitter. It could have not been on Twitter. I would never know. But you can only do so many before you start to say, well, how many places do you need it to be? And if it's that one place that you would like it, as long as I'm hitting 3,500 other people and I don't hit 2, I don't want to overemphasize what those 2 people think.
Yeah.
And that's the troubling part about surveys is that you're always going to have people say, well, you didn't do that. Well, like you said, well, yeah, we did. Just because you didn't see it or we didn't personally contact you, then you're going to hold us accountable for that. I think there's got to be a kind of a rational thinking of how much emphasis to put on a particular comment, because sometimes they're just dismiss them.
Which makes me ask the question, is there a realm at which you over-communicate? And people get, if I open my email up and I've got 35 emails, I'm like, okay, or if I'm getting the same, like a whole bunch of emails from the same place, how do I decide what's important? Is it based upon the heading? What's in the subject line, or, if there's a tweet that's sent out, or if there's Facebook posting, do you miss then important things and you're getting minimal things that maybe shouldn't be there or aren't as important? I'm just posing a question, don't really have an answer for that.
I'm sure I think of sometimes, without mentioning names, there's sometimes people that will send us a lot of emails. And I've spoken to people that sometimes you send so much, and sometimes there's some good ideas, but sometimes they could get lost on folks because the volume of stuff that you're always sending. And I was wondering, based on the discussion, if in next year's survey, and if we communicate it regularly, if you would allow the district, or if you would welcome a phone call to talk about any of your responses. Put your name and put your phone number, and we'll give you a call. Because that might be able to, talk to the people about their individual misperceptions, or just fair criticisms. We want to hear more.
Kind of what I'm pulling from these is people want more specific, and to be specific, they want to speak more with the individual building administrators. So is it feasible to have a let's talk in September with the Clark administrators? October would be Bristol. You know what I'm saying? Is it possible to kind of, and then have, like somebody mentioned, have an actual purpose? Baker Road's new school building, or you know what I'm saying? Is it possible to?
You mean with board members? Or
Yes, with
separately?
board members and the administrators, because seems like a lot of people. Some are saying, well, they're vague. What's the purpose? Blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have specifics and a purpose, would that draw more people in?
Yeah.
I think if you have a purpose, you kind of defeat that purpose, because you want people to be able to come and say whatever their concern is, because your concern is probably not the same as mine. So you don't usually feel like, oh, I can't go today because they're talking about the new
Can you speak a
building.
little closer to the microphone? It's hard to hear you. Sorry.
Joe said that,
Survey was that our facilities, the district's facilities were in need of attention. That was a fairly common theme mentioned in the comments, as well as just the priorities, where the number one priority was teachers, but then the number two was facilities. And that was 34%, I think. That's not typical for a school district, and I think does indicate that there's a recognition by the community that our facilities do need some attention. So what we're talking about here is an opportunity to really talk about what the district's facilities will look like going forward. It's kind of a strategic plan, a comprehensive strategic plan for our facilities. We're, in terms of trying to get the board's input, we're looking fairly narrowly at enrollment and accommodating enrollment with new space, because a lot of the other needs the board's already aware of. We've already done the study of the comprehensive facilities assessment study. We have the results of that. We've done an accessibility study. We're in the process of doing a safety and security evaluation. So we're going to have all of these other pieces that we can look at that represent capital needs along with new space needs. And that will include programmatical kinds of things too. I'll be engaging with the principals over the next month or so about how their current space is either meeting their needs or not meeting their program needs, so in terms of existing space, but also whether there's adequate space for our program needs at the building level, irrespective of enrollment. And now then I think we'll have a pretty comprehensive look from east to west and north to south of all of the facilities related needs, and then it'll become how do we then prioritize those needs. How do we compare needs in one area to needs in the other area as we prioritize them all in a district level, and then how do we develop a funding plan and a timing plan to address all of those needs.
Anything else from a process standpoint? Okay, we can come back to it. As we look at solutions or potential solutions, and this could be kind of the same question. What do you see as things that you want the board prioritizes in terms of these solutions? So let's just give it the priorities for solutions, and then we'll come to the don't go there.
Probably the one thing that's a major concern is the funding to make this all happen, as far as whether or not it's from existing resources or whether it's potential for a no tax increase bond issue, how that's approached, where we've stepped in the past and where we've done well in the past, and kind of finding the best ways to communicate that, should that be the step that's taken, because that's probably going to be the most of interest part of this to the community as a whole, especially those who are kind of on that fringe, or even away from the fringe of, I'm only concerned about the district when it comes to how it's going to affect my tax bill.
Sure.
Maybe it's obvious, but school safety needs to be a priority.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the community is going to have very strong feelings on both sides of that. We've already heard that from several people. I know I've talked to several people about that some people are very insistent on the fact that we'll lose our community spirit and our ability to, that neighborly thing that's always been Webster's kind of calling card, and our communities, the various communities we serve. versus, gosh, I feel like I'm going into, a prison because everybody's got to be funneled through one entrance and they've got to be scanned. And, if I go to pick up my child, I have to be put in a room with these couches that I'm essentially locked into just because one person might have a custody issue and, blah, 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 blah. And you hear that from people. But it's like, again, if we're saving we're keeping one situation from happening, is that the best way to approach it?
Well, and that's a decision that I would assume would need to be made fairly early on in this process,
Absolutely.
right? Because if we want airport security, I mean, if the community wants airport security, then
Yeah.
that's going to affect how we
Yeah.
proceed with a lot of this.
Yeah. Well, that's why, our processes include going to the community and seeing what they have to say on it.
Well, and then it's also going to be one of those things where you're going to have to, whatever you decide, your students, especially, because they're there more, the student staff, they're going to have to be able to manage, going through that system on a daily basis.
Sure.
And in some cases, with kids coming, going with special programs and things like that, or working outside schools, they're going to have issues of, can I go out that door, or can I come in that door, or what if my friend holds the door open for me? And we talked about that a lot at the Building Advisory Committee, as far as, some very strong feelings about, on both sides, which is how do you get everybody to toe the line and follow whatever procedure you establish.
And you don't want it to feel like a prison.
Right. I mean,
At the end of the day, I think nobody wants to go to school in a prison.
Is there a thought, and this is kind of a branch off, but it's just something that I contemplate a lot. Is there a thought, not the school safety, the building itself should be safe by all means, but a lot of that comes from the people. So what I'm saying is there a thought maybe put a lot of emphasis on more counseling for kids, more counseling for teachers, more counseling for, you know what I'm saying? So that the problem comes from the people themselves. So to me, school safety kind of starts when you're dealing with people's issues, if you will. So that, to me, there's kind of a balance. Yes, by all means, do something to make, I don't know, whatever you do to make the building safer.
Yeah.
But in the end, you still got to do.
No, really, that's what you're
Right,
saying.
yeah,
Make the people safer.
you still have to deal with where the problem
Yeah.
initiates.
Well, and for me, in terms of an element for the building and facilities, it's that we're building a student-centered environment that supports success and safety.
I assume student input will be.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think a lot of the schools where they've had shootings had all the, Sandy Hook they had all, it doesn't matter. If somebody comes in with a big gun, it's more about trying to target the kids that are at risk.
Well, and I'm not trying to necessarily go down that road. I just know that there are people in the community that will feel otherwise. And
No, I
so
agree
we
with you.
have to decide fairly early on,
No, I agree.
not necessarily now, but at some point.
And whatever steps you take, if it's different than what you're doing now, people will eventually evolve to accept and do what your new steps are. And it's just a question of, do you feel comfortable that you've gone far enough to ensure even more safety than what you had before? Because, again, I've always said, most of the time, whenever you make a change in schools, it's the parents that usually have the more difficult time accepting it. The kids usually are pretty malleable. It's like asking a child to go to a different school next year. I mean, within about 2 weeks, they're going to have new friends. They add on to the old ones, and they mosey along. They like their teacher, and they go to school and they do their thing. It's the parents that get all crazy about, they're going to go, a half mile farther this way than they did this way. But the kids seem to be able to adjust. So whatever we do in the schools, facility-wise, the kids will do a very good job of adjusting to it. I mean, we found that when we put the outbuildings in at Clark and Edgar Road and Avery several years ago. I mean, the kids were hey, I'm going to be in this cool new classroom, blah, blah, blah. I mean, for the most part, I mean, there might have been one or two that had a little more trouble adjusting to it. But it was really the parents that were more concerned about it than what the kids were. And I think these are the kinds of changes too, that once the kids accept that, hey, every day I've got to do this now, or I've got to swipe a card, or whatever it might be, I'm not, the details are, they're the ones who usually become more accepting more quickly.
That's true. There's a note in here that there's a safety and security assessment by Gallagher Bassett in July. What's that?
You want to speak to that, Bruce?
We have a consultant that is made available to this district free of charge to go through and campus by campus go through and do an assessment of physical safety
Great.
of each of our campuses. Matt, the director of facilities, Matt Palmer, and myself accompanied him to one school just to kind of see what was involved, also be able to communicate what the district's concerns and priorities and questions were. As kind of a pilot assessment, we did Hudson as that pilot, and then he has gone around to all of the other campuses to do those same kinds of physical assessments, and will be providing the district with a report and recommendations by campus.
Great, that'll be very
Middle of July, by the end of July, certainly. And I think you, right out of the gate, Keita, you identified there's really two aspects of safety and security. I call it the soft aspect and then the hard aspect, with the hard aspect being the physical kinds of things with limiting access to the buildings and locked doors and cameras and those kinds of physical things that would be put in, and that's what this study is designed to do. It's not designed to address the people part of it, the counseling, even the procedures that the buildings would use in terms of implementing safety improvements and so forth. That's another aspect of it. What we're looking at here is just the hard part of it, the physical parts of security.
To Keita's point earlier, I mean, one of the things that has been fairly consistent through most of the episodes that we've seen happen in other places is so many times it's like the response afterwards is, yeah, I always knew that kid was going to go crazy at some point in time.
Exactly.
And it's trying to get people up in front of it way ahead of time, and then also maybe pushing the envelope a little bit, edge of the envelope a little bit about it, as far as how we deal with some of those kids. And I know we have student laws and student protection laws and things like that, but we also, the other students in the schools also deserve to have the same amount of protection that we offer a child that might be having some issues and that need to be dealt with. And so many times, just the one in Florida as an example, I mean, that was well documented that the kid was well known around the school to be one that could become unhinged at some point in time, and he did. And I think we have to also be pushing our leaders in the community to be more aggressive in saying how you can deal with people that have some mental issues. I mean, we can only do so much in the school, and I'm not saying that we can't do more, because I think we can, but I think we also have to have our students be comfortable in saying, hey, look, if you know so-and-so has really been dealing with some issues, even if it's not to the point where you think they're going to, come do something really stupid or hurt themselves or someone else, you got to say something. It's not snitching. It's not you're not a tattletale to come in and say, hey, look, I heard Jimmy Joe down the street, talking about how he hated his teacher and blah, 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 and, he would, whatever the comment might be. Somebody's got to say something about what Jimmy Joe said. And we have to make our students and our counselors feel comfortable to approach Jimmy Joe and say, hey, let's talk. Let's find out what's going on here. I'm hearing some things.
Kind of piggybacking just off the security thing, I just want to make sure that when the high school starts in the fall, that we've got that whole situation straightened out.
Yeah.
And really that all the administrators understand that a laxness of that can be very disastrous.
Yeah.
Or people can take advantage of that. And
Yeah.
we really want to make sure that the high school has things really set up before school begins.
Yeah, they're on it.
And just a quick side note too, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Webster Groves Police Department spent 4 days this past week doing active shooter training in high school. They brought all their officers in, both shifts, and did kind of what they call MAC attack, what their response would be. They were happening in addition to touring the school. I found it very beneficial to be in our building to do that stuff.
One last quick comment on school safety. The city council has expressed an interest in working with us there and just around this whole issue of what can we do to make schools safer. I think, Nikita's point about the soft aspects of it, to the extent the city might have some resources in terms of mental health or anything that they might be able to provide, I think it's a really good opportunity for collaboration. And so we're going to start that process hopefully to meet over the summer.
And that's the Webster City Council, right? Okay.
Yes, they've reached out and said this is something that we are really interested in and would like to work with you all. And I say great.
And I think that's a perfect opportunity to even maybe invite some of our other community members to participate in those kind of discussions too.
So I think we're going to have, and John doesn't know this yet, but I think we're going to meet with Jerry and city council member and talk about how to proceed.
Well, not
Hopefully
all of
that'll
our,
happen in the next month.
Not all of our schools are in Webster Groves, and
Correct.
not all of our students are in Webster
Correct.
Groves. Is it possible we can also collaborate with other?
I think that.
Yeah, that was my point, yeah, because inviting, Mayor Mahan, new Mayor Shearer in Shrewsbury, our Glendale and Wood folks, and even though we have probably less than a couple hundred students from those communities, it's still something we really need to do a better job of, at least inviting them to be a part of that. I mean, if they don't do it, that's, I understand that, but.
Great.
They were invited to be part of the process.
Right.
One thing that I would kind of add up here would be controlling, and it's not the best word for that, but it's the only word I can come up with right now. Controlling class size within the realm in which we can control it. And I'm thinking of things like inter-district, inter-building transfers, and how those are allowed, and how that puts a building at more of a population that's pushing its limits than other buildings or grade levels. And I know the VIC program, that's pretty set in its numbers, as the Riverview and Normandy things are. The other thing would be, and I know we talked about this last year, are non-resident students of staff members, children of staff members, and how that impacts our class sizes and our building sizes. Another one is the waiver process and the management of the waiver process and how that impacts class sizes and grade level and building sizes. And then the last thing is really...
I'm sorry, I don't know, what specifically waiver process are you talking about?
Residency
waivers.
Oh, residence waivers, for staff?
No.
Because we don't have many non-resident tuition-paying students, right?
Tuition, no, but we do have some students whose parents are living with someone else in the district. They're not the homeowner, or they're not the renter themselves, but the family lives with somebody else.
Okay, I was just looking for clarify what you meant by the waiver process.
Yeah, that's 95 kids. And then how many kids that, go between buildings and buildings. And I can't remember the number of kids from staff who live outside the district. I can't remember that number at all.
About 80.
Okay. And then really the class size numbers that the board decides are what we think we're going to need to have maximum programmatic effectiveness.
I think too, and I think maybe this is going to go a little bit into your next question, but to be an equitable solution and to be mindful of, if we're looking at redistricting, neighborhoods.
I'm sorry,
To be mindful of neighborhoods.
oh, if redistricting.
Yeah.
With the programmatic needs, I'm assuming that means curriculum. basically? Is that
Not
kind of-
necessarily, it's basically a conversation, it could be, but it may be a conversation about how is your space not meeting your need? How's your current space not meeting your
Okay.
needs? It might be curriculum-wise, it may be that they have already used a lot of their non-classroom space to make classrooms, like at Edgar Road, for instance, they have a tiny music room. They don't have a teacher's lounge. It's been all kind of moved around in order to try to create additional classrooms within the building until we had to finally resort to putting modulars there. And so now when we talk about equity of space between buildings, Edgar Road doesn't have the same kind of non-classroom space, let's say, as some of the other schools that haven't experienced the growth in enrollment.
Is there thought, like, to have teacher input? Like, I guess I'm thinking like we, at Gibbons, a couple of the classrooms got these new wonderful interactive boards, these new, basically television monitors that are touchscreen, and the kids can go up and do all these different things with them. So is there thought to like maybe upgrading some of these classes with these similar things where these new and innovative ideas can be utilized? Would that be considered part of facility, or is that something else?
Right now, we're focusing on the facilities aspect, not you're talking about like instructional equipment.
Okay.
Tech or materials,
There,
not-
so
Oh.
that would be a kind of a different aspect. We're just
Oh.
looking at the building facility aspect.
Okay, gotcha.
So I think, Steve, you were saying something earlier about the modulars and people getting used to them.
Mhm.
But I think you still have a community that's not really a community, because you definitely have people excluded from the community when you have.
Because they're outside the main part of the building. No, I certainly appreciate that, yeah.
And some people like it, other people don't.
Right.
But how are we building a community, I think is an important question.
Arnold, can I come back to yours? When you were sharing those different things,
Mhm.
are you thinking that those are things that need to be examined as part of it?
Mhm.
Is that right? That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I was clear. Doing a great job, Sandy.
So in terms of, you're looking for feedback from us on piecemeal or comprehensive approach. Can you explain again what you mean by that?
Yeah, and really looking at do we attack space and facility needs as we see them, as they emerge in spaces, or do we look at more comprehensive, being a little bit more strategic? I mean, we full disclosure, we feel like a comprehensive approach. Look at it
That
as-
sounds like a loaded question.
It does. It does. But we didn't know, because again, it's looking at, so we know Edgar Road's already full. It's already full. Is the thought like we need to get space to Edgar Road,
I don't
or
necessarily-
do we look at the entire district?
Because it really is a
Processes.
two-pronged thing. There are facilities that need improvement, period,
Yeah.
regardless of whether there is an enrollment issue.
Yes, sir.
And at certain buildings, there's an enrollment issue.
Yes.
So there's a two-pronged kind of.
Yeah, I don't see them as mutually exclusive, because you can approach the entire thing with a comprehensive look, but knowing that you have priorities of this is something
Right.
that has to be done now.
Right.
It's kind of like we talked about at the Building Advisory Committee. It's like, is it an immediate need? Is it a safety need? Is it these are the high priority things. Those are going to be dealt with whether or not you're looking at the entire process or the entire thing comprehensively. You're still going to have those that it's going to basically float to the top and say, yeah, this has got to be addressed now.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Right.
In terms of identifying options for managing and dealing with growth and needs going forward, you can do it piecemeal, kind of as you go, which basically equals putting modular classrooms
That's what we
where
could
you
do,
have
right, more or
growth.
less?
Yeah.
But that's piecemeal as you go. You can
Yeah.
also do piecemeal with more advanced planning, so that would be we're not going to change any of the major kinds of ways that the district is currently structured with boundary lines and grade configurations and all that kind of thing. And therefore, we're going to predict where do we need that additional space and then construct that space in advance of the need. Because if you're not doing it in advance of the need and you're waiting for the need to be there, you're doing the ad hoc kind of a thing as you go, which is modular. So piecemeal with some advanced planning means adding space where it's needed, but more traditional space kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Then comprehensive kind of goes past that and says, let's look at everything in the district and see what the best solution is, all things considered.
Yeah.
And within that comprehensive approach is really where now what are the must-haves and the off-the-tables are in looking at that comprehensive approach. It gives us some guidance as we look at the comprehensive solution. Is don't go here and make sure you consider this.
Thank you, that's very helpful. And I think in terms of, for our purposes, for planning purposes, why would we not do the comprehensive approach, knowing that we're not committing to doing any of the things that might be proposed?
Yeah.
Especially when
But
we
let's
have
know what our
the
options
study
are.
that shows that we're going to have the problem everywhere.
Yeah.
So-
The reason would be is the piecemeal as we go is probably less expensive in the short term. So it's the short term, least expensive way.
Yes.
And then the others become, maybe more expensive in the short term, but maybe more efficient and better in the long term.
Yeah.
So-
Well, what about any elements that the board feels, at this point are off the table, in terms of solutions? Because some of those things, some of the solutions, especially as it relates to space and enrollment, if you're talking about boundary lines, you're talking about moving grade levels, those are some pretty big deals that, certainly take a lot of thought, come with a lot of motion. So we don't want to, if there are certain things that you don't want to go down that road, us to present, it would probably yield it would change the process possibly a little, or make the process be a little bit.
I realize that there's work involved in keeping pretty much everything on the table, but I think if we're really taking a good hard look at it, I think you've got to be able to, at least at a top line level, discuss those tough subjects. I mean, whether it's, buying a building, buying some facility that's already within our district, as an example, or the redistricting part, or drawing, redrawing lines. I don't think that you should really take anything off the table, because you might find something that's appealing to you if you dig a little farther, and something that's a little edgier, a little crazy. I even took it, and the rest of the board doesn't know this, but I kind of took it upon myself to write kind of a, here's my crazy thought email to Bruce and John one day about where could we find additional space that's not currently ours. And there's, admittedly, I put some pretty crazy ideas in there just to say, hey, think about it. Whether that's buying back a school we used to own, or buying a facility that's now currently empty and changing it into a school. These were all things, it's like, I don't think we should take anything really off the table, because it might be a solution for us.
I agree with you.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, is adding an additional elementary school totally out of the question? We used to have at least 5 others when I was coming up, and they all closed because the numbers went down. Now the numbers are going back up. So I kind of like that thought. Is that totally off the grid? Just another.
Yeah.
I would say the only thing that is off the table for me is being afraid to do what we think is right because some people won't like it. So that's sort of a backwards way of saying exactly what y'all are saying, which is nothing's off the table.
We're going to have a hard conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And frankly, I trust you all to come back to us with what's good for kids in the long term as well as the short term.
Yeah.
Which made me think of one more thing that I would want to see in the problem-solving process, and hopefully it would come up when you're talking to building principals, but creative space, not just classroom space. But looking at Edgar Road, there is no space to gather a group of kids unless you're going to go outside. Same thing with Avery, maybe in a hallway. Like some whether it's a maker space or.
Yeah, because when those places were built, there was no concept of, hey, we want to gather the kids in an area and just to be able to
Right.
sit around. I mean, it was, you were in a classroom, your desks were
Yes,
lined up
yeah.
a certain way.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
even as a student, you had no input as to, I'd like to be able to sit and look at my class. No, you're going to look at the back of his head, and that's it.
Whereas at Gibbons and Steger, we have actually the opposite. We have tons of room. We've got that nice courtyard that they would love to make into like an outdoor classroom. We've got tons, I mean, there's tons of possibilities, if you will. And
I apologize, I've got to ring off now. Sorry I couldn't listen before. Thanks very much for making the accommodation.
All right.
See you, David. Bye.
Hi, Dave.
Bye.
Sandy, I'm not trying to wordsmith or edit for you, but the one about the city, yeah, if we could make sure that we add the other communities in there as well, open that up to the other communities that we serve.
So our focus, I mean, I think one of the things that the direction that we were headed, and I'm just curious if, our process, which we'll talk about, has a pretty aggressive time frame. And we're trying to focus more on what do we see as, what are more of the needs, as opposed to,
Wants?
more than the wants. So we can certainly see what the wants are as a part of it. But with some of the concerns that we have from the safety, security, the accessibility, and the overcrowding, we could have multiple layers of needs and wants, but
I think your
Open
needs and
spaces.
wants will flesh out as the more you talk about those things, because, again, the school safety thing, I think, is a need.
yeah.
It's a need, it's a short term, it's a action item that has, to me, floated to the top to say, yeah, this is something we need to deal with sooner than later, simply because of the fact that you have something happen, that's always going to happens a day or a week or a month before you were really going to talk about something that might have prevented that, so.
Yeah.
Well, I guess from my vantage point, when you start talking about wants, you start talking about laundry lists. And I don't think the community wants to go that direction. I think we have from the,
What do you mean by that?
I think,
Art laundry list?
hey, tell us, go into a building and say, if you could make this anything, what would you make? Well, you'll just get this, Taj Mahal list of things. I think we have a facilities condition assessment list that should be driving, because we need to take care of our facilities. And before they, in several years fall down amongst us. So in the course of that, if things can be tweaked to add something along the way that's not out of the realm,
Yeah.
that's fine. If it's like, okay, well, we need to, we need an indoor stadium, I'm just making it up. Well, that ain't gonna happen. So that's kind of what I mean by a laundry list, where people will go to their extremes and their
dreams.
desire, their dreams, yes.
I think it could come through. Our thinking was kind of the same thing regarding the needs and just where to start at this point was looking more at needs. But I think through Bruce's, through the work on the programmatic aspect, I do think that will surface community type spaces or spaces within the building. So we can certainly record those and make those a part of it, but may not be what ultimately
Yeah.
gets vetted. Because again, Bruce has developed, and we're kind of listening to you today,
You're only kind of listening to.
Well, no. Like a vetting rubric for things to be able to prioritize ultimately you know, what we come back to, what we say we want to, you know, dedicate funds to. So some of those things may not, you know, safety, security is a huge one.
Right.
So, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it's, I mean, we know what the price tag was of the facilities condition assessment was about $50 million, which included inflation adjustments over that 10-year period. Excluding that's it was 44 million, I think it was. And then from accessibility, we did a study. We're having that updated right now, but the most recent study we had from a couple of years ago in terms of making our buildings fully accessible. Right now, all of our buildings are accessible, they're just not fully accessible, was $10 to $20 million to make all of the buildings fully accessible. Asbestos abatement, we know, is going to be a few $1,000,000 to make progress on abating asbestos that's in the buildings, particularly it's floor tile and then asbestos that's in some of our maintenance tunnels that our guys have to suit up in to just go in and work on plumbing and other kinds of things that are in those maintenance tunnels. That degrades over time. Right now it's, you know, it's encapsulated, it's not friable or airborne, that kind of thing. But when you go in and you disturb it, and as it gets older, it just becomes more fragile. And then when we start talking about new space for enrollment growth, that's going to have a price tag attached to it. We don't know what it is yet because we don't know what that solution is going to look like. And then programmatical needs, but you can add all of those up, and we're going to be, you know, approaching $100 million probably for just all of that. Now, that's not all immediate need because the $50 million for the condition assessment was spread over a 10-year period of time, and some of these other things can be phased in too. So it's not all that everything has to be done all at once. But when you look at the magnitude of just those basic things, the want aspect of it, the desirable, kind of becomes probably unrealistic in terms of affordability. And so when I communicated to the principals about I'm coming and I want to talk about programmatical needs, how's your space meeting your needs, how's it not meeting your needs, this is not a wish list exercise.
Yeah.
This is basic needs.
Yeah.
How is it not meeting your basic needs?
Yeah.
So, you know, and I think from financially, that's the more realistic approach to take at this point.
Can you get us a date and as to when the last asbestos abatement was done in the district? I know there was one done at Steger last
Yeah.
summer, but I mean prior to that. I know covering over tile with carpeting, that's one to minimize it, but I mean complete removal. Can you check on when the last time that was done?
On a comprehensive basis, instead of as things are done, like we're doing some abatement over in Hickson right now in order to put up a dividing wall in a classroom. I think we took up some in order to replace the carpet with tile in the hallways over there. That was also, I believe, an abatement project aspect to that. So Hickson would be the last one that we're doing in conjunction with those projects. But in terms of doing something to go in and address abatement for some reason other than we have to go in and do some work there anyway, to just go and take care of it, I don't know the last time. It was before I was here.
Okay. We can check with folks, see what documents or what's available that maybe speaks to that. Well, is there anything that came up? So I feel like we've gotten a lot of information here. And Bruce will share just a little bit about his process, and I'll share a little bit about mine. Is there anything that came up through that conversation regarding the process or solutions or approaches that somebody wants to, I'll say argue with, but not really argue, but that doesn't agree with?
No. Also, you mentioned something about timeline being a short timeline. I think that is for the best because I
Me
think
too.
we want to keep everybody's attention as we go through this, and I don't want it to be one of those things where I remember they said something about that, and then a year goes by and
Yeah.
nothing's happened, so I'm in favor of the short term.
Yeah. Me too. It'll be aggressive, but. keep the
But obviously
focus.
take
Keep
the time you
focus.
need to do it right.
Right. Not gonna rush it.
Right.
Okay, Bruce, do you just want to touch on yours?
We've talked about a lot of it. There's a lot of other aspects other than just the new space needs to accommodate facilities growth. And they're in different areas. So one of the things that we've been working on is a scoring rubric to be able to prioritize, to give a score to each need that's identified in each of the different areas, and to put them on a level playing field, or kind of pass them through a common filter to get the score, so that we can prioritize needs in different areas on some kind of a common framework. The Building Advisory Committee has been working on that. They see their role as kind of taking all of these different components and prioritizing them. Some of them, just in a kind of a broad manner, will probably be non-discretionary kinds of items that don't even need to be scored. These have to be done. A boiler that has to be replaced. We can't have a school open without heat. So the boiler's going to have to be either replaced or remanufactured, renovated, kind of a thing. So that would kind of go on a non-discretionary list. Once we come up with an enrollment plan that's acceptable by the board, that additional space is going to be kind of, we have to do that in order to meet the enrollment needs or the enrollment growth of the district, and becomes non-discretionary. But old windows, old carpet, old doors, some amount of tuck pointing on brickwork and asphalt, those kinds of things are a little bit more, they're more discretionary in nature, and those are the ones then that will go through the scoring rubric. And after we divide them, here's the items that are identified through this that are non-discretionary that we have to do, and then here's the everything else that is discretionary. We score all of those, and then prioritize all of those, and then we talk about how much funding is available, and the timing of that funding, and the timing of the projects, and put together some kind of a plan of, here's the price tag of the non-discretionary items that we're going to have to do, here's how much money we have available in the operating budget to support these kinds of projects. Here's the amount of additional resources that's needed for the rest of this, and here's our options for funding this, either through no tax increase, bond issue, or other kind of a funding plan for that.
And he'll talk a little bit about the funding aspect at the end. As far as the enrollment committee, Bruce, do you want to just first describe, we put in the back of the charts, those different charts. He had presented one chart without modulars at a board meeting a couple months ago.
That was with the modulars.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But for the reasons related to what Christine had said, and actually Dr. Stricker, I thought it would be good to see the chart without the modulars too, because that is what we want our ideal schools to be, everybody inside. Do you want to explain that to folks?
Yes. So the first page you're looking at is without modulars. You look up in the title, and it's got without in capital. The second, in capital letters, the second is with the modulars. And if you just kind of flip real quickly between those two, you can see the dark shaded area without the modulars. There's a lot more of that. In other words, we run into space constraints a lot sooner, and at a lot more campuses, a lot more schools without the modulars. And if one of our goals is to try to build community by eliminating the modulars for regular classrooms, then the without modulars is the more appropriate kind of roadmap to look at. And you can see, Edgar Road obviously is probably the most immediate need, but also Avery and Clark is not far behind in terms of the need for additional space if we're going to try to eliminate the modulars and accommodate the projected enrollment growth at the same time. When we go on to, and then if you look at elementary even as the total for all of the space that we have at the elementary level and the projected enrollment without the modulars, you see that over the next few years, even moving kids around is not going to solve the elementary space problem. We're still going to run 3 or 4 years out from now, we're going to run into space constraints at the elementary school. So a long-term solution would really not be just adjusting attendance boundaries. That would not give us a long-term solution by itself at the elementary level. If we look at the back of that page and we look at Steger, Hickson, the high school, you can see that the picture looks a little better there in terms of space. Steger, we have an exceptionally large class of 6th graders coming up next year, and then in 2021 as well. But other than those 2 years, we're decent at Steger. We're not at the desirable level, but we're less than the maximum level. We're kind of in between desirable and maximum. Hickson is kind of in that same range, is between desirable and the maximum levels. That there's 2 lines, I should have mentioned this at first, there's 2 lines for each school. One is the projected enrollment, that's the top line for each school, and then the bottom line for each school that says actual, Hickson actual, that's what the actual enrollment is. The projected enrollment is based on resident enrollment from our demographer, that's the Cothron report. Numbers get plugged into there, so when you look at the elementary schools, those are the kids that, when you look at the projected line, those are the kids that reside in that attendance area. The actual attendance then reflects who actually enrolls there. So if a child lives in Avery but goes to Edgar Road through the choice program, then in the projected line they're in Avery's numbers, but in the actual line they're in Edgar Road's numbers. And we just kind of, and also the same thing with non-resident students. Those would be the transfer, the VST students. And then students of, non-resident students of staff are not in the projected line, but they are in the actual line. And that's why when you look at the actual line in total for the elementary level and in total for the school district, it's higher than the projected line. It's because the projected line just includes those resident students. The actual line includes those various categories of non-resident students.
And all the gray ones are above the maximum capacity to 100%, 110%.
All of the shaded ones are
Right.
above what we've defined as the maximum capacity of 110% of the designed or desirable capacity.
Right.
So that too is something just to keep in mind, that was somewhat of an arbitrary, subjective level. We just assumed a 10% above the desirable level, we would be hitting the maximum level. Could we go a little bit above that without being in violation of codes or safety standards or something like that? Yes, I mean, we could, but we needed to make some kind of an assumption for what that maximum level would be. And that when we looked at the desirable and the maximum class sizes, particularly at the elementary level, where, for instance, at the kindergarten level, it's 17, 17 for kindergarten, and then grades 1 through second is
K2 is 17.
K2 is 17.
3-4 is 20.
20.
5 is 22.
So if you look at 3-4 is 20.
And then we have the window outside of it.
Yes, in that window. And if you look at that window, it represented about 10 to 15% above the desirable class size, was the class size where we then split and bring in an additional teacher. So we felt like, okay, well, we'll use that same kind of a rubric for defining the maximum capacity of a building, if that's what we're using for the desirable versus the maximum class sizes for staffing purposes, and we'd use that to be consistent in the facilities study. So you can see at the secondary level, other than Steger being kind of between the desirable and the maximum, Hickson is kind of hit and miss. Some years they're above the desirable, that are between, kind of in that desirable to maximum range. Some years they're at desirable or below. In the high school, they're in the desirable, even below the desirable level throughout the whole projection. So at the secondary level, there's no, what I would call, there's no indicated compelling need for space in the foreseeable future at those schools as they currently are structured.
Any questions about those charts? So, and again, kind of what Sandy said, with the different levels, so what we did this year is we, for example, we added a teacher someplace, we removed a teacher through attrition. Another place is we look at, we take that desirable or that standard level that's in board policy, and we extend 3 kids in a classroom above that. So if it's a kindergarten classroom and we hit for 17, we fill 3 kindergarten classes of 20. And we, so we go 3 above, but once we hit 21, we trigger a new section. And so we kind of do the same thing. We lose a section if it goes the other direction. Now, certainly there's some considerations, because you have like Edgar Road that's, had to, again, not using traditional classrooms to put like a kindergarten class, so you can only fit like maybe 12 kids or first grade class in that class. So you do make adjustments, but for the most part, this year we kind of created that and stood by it. So.
Is 3 above the desirable standard for the grade level?
3 above the standard. That's what we did this year.
Is that equal among schools?
Yeah. Yeah. Unless special circumstances. This is the first year that we created something that was kind of just plug them in, where does it fall, and go.
I mean, like Avery classroom size is the same size as another school's
Oh.
classroom size?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That's different in different places. It's different in different places.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, you could have, well, if you're saying what I think you're saying. So, for example, let's just use Hudson and computer school. Computer school, you might have, because they have a special little Givens. Thank you. God.
He has been so good.
So at Givens, like they take up to 22 kids for all sections. So you may have 21, 22 kids in a section, but then at Hudson you may have 17 or 18.
But the maximum.
The maximum's
Is
the same everywhere absent Givens, because Givens has always been on this separate. Yeah, but how it looks based on enrollment obviously is different in all the different settings. But this year we looked at it all, and so for example, there was a section at Clark that had been a section of 3 4th graders, but then we moved to 2 sections of 5th graders, because when you used our new formula, they were a class size of 15. 3 class sizes of 15. And so when we combine them, we fit underneath our formula for 2 sections of 5th.
Do we, and obviously every year is different, but in an era where it seems to be like homes are being sold and bought and people moving in, do we anticipate a lot of late summer enrollments this year, as far as in any particular school? I mean, is there a way to even anticipate based on what the norms are? Those kind of, I mean, I would assume that at least at every one of our schools, we have somebody walk in August and go, hey, we just moved into the area 2 weeks ago and we need to register our kids for school.
As part of our enrollment group, Steve, we looked at the number of summer withdrawals and summer enrollments.
Okay.
And there wasn't necessarily a consistency. It always happens.
Right.
So some years in some schools there'd be a lot, some years in some schools there'd be...
Well, like I said, with the way the marketplace is as far as real estate goes, I mean, I would imagine
Pretty hot.
7 or 8 years ago, we didn't have as much because homes and things like that weren't changing hands as often. But now it seems like as soon as the for sale sign goes up, there's families moving in and there's kids and there's a high likelihood that they're going to show up on our doorstep at some point in time this summer. And I didn't know if we had any kind of normality as far as it's 13 kids across the district usually come in at this point in time, or?
That data was discussed a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's interesting information to have.
Because it certainly can affect, because I know one year it affected adding a whole nother section at a school at the very last minute.
Yeah, we added
Yeah.
kindergarten.
We keep monitoring the enrollment on a pretty regular basis to see
Because they have to come here first, right? Before they go to the schools?
during the
In the summer.
summertime.
During the summertime, right.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So you have a better handle on that because you're obviously getting
Seeing
that.
them, yeah.
Yeah.
And we've
Somebody's at
really-
the front desk, oh, add another one, another.
And we've
another
really
kid.
tried to support and encourage schools to communicate via marquees or any of your newsletters and get kids enrolled, especially kindergarten. Get them enrolled because of the staffing element.
Yeah.
And so we made decisions this year on kindergarten, based on where, combination of what's projected as well as what are you showing right now based on enrollment. And, like we told, for example, I think it was Clark, where they were projecting to have many more kindergartners that would have triggered another teacher. But their enrollment as of the end of the year wasn't showing it. And so instead of having class sizes of 12, we're like, you know what, we're not going to add now, but we need to keep on top of this.
Right.
So that if we need to add, we will. So it's kind of looking at both of that.
Yeah, I would imagine there's probably ones that are more on your radar than others.
There are.
Yeah.
Edgar Road, Clark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even Hudson a little bit. Some of their, Hudson's, 44, 40, 42, you get to 45 and you're.
That's a question I have is, settling on the number 3 versus the number 5. Or, where's the,
Or 0.
yeah, or
Yeah.
or raising that up even higher. Or if there is no room, then, okay, when you reach this, whatever number is decided, then you're going to bring in, I'm not talking about a teacher aide, you're going to bring in another teacher assistant, somebody who is not going to give grades, but who is
Yeah.
helping, because you might not have the room to put another class size. It's a question. Where are you going to do that?
Yeah.
And some of the buildings, truthfully, they don't, like you think Hudson, all of our classrooms pretty much there's no classroom, right? So that's another piece to consider, that currently in some of the buildings, there is not an empty room to put another class.
Which is what I was saying, because if you have 60 new people show up at Edgar Road, you've got a real problem.
Yeah.
And it's going to be extra teachers and 2 teachers in classrooms, or one,
Yeah.
the main teacher, the other one's a teacher assistant.
Yeah.
But is that process being discussed now? So we know what we got going on.
Yeah, there are some, in our preliminary numbers, there were some schools and some grade levels in particular that we have highlighted, and we're looking and we're talking about what that could look like, feel like, and in
Okay.
communication with the principals.
Okay.
And it's a waiting game,
Yeah.
because if you move too quick, then you have 10 kids
Right.
in classes, and then the teacher down the hall with 20, she doesn't understand that. It
Yeah.
just creates a whole dynamic.
Right.
And so we will try to move as quick as we can once we know, but the key is definitely the enrollment piece, which I hope that the efforts that we have with the new online registration and enrollment process, maybe it could be more appealing. It's not as cumbersome, because some people just wait. It's not a rush. I'll get there.
Yeah.
I just
when
want to
get
make sure
there.
that there's a process in place if there aren't classrooms available.
Yeah.
That there's no more room. There's no more teacher's lounge, there's no more music room, there's no more art room, because those people are on wheels.
Yes.
There's no more closets, there's no
There's
more
no more
under the
closet space.
stairs.
But we have to put students somewhere. How are we going to do that? That there's some process for that.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that we talked about. So we set that 3 above, 25 fifth graders, once you hit 26, triggers a new section based on kind of historic enrollment trends, and the community has always spoken about class size. That's always been like a favorable thing. So that's how we kind of came up with that. It's going to be high comparatively, but it still kind of falls within our window of what we've done. That's how we came up with that number. And that ultimately could be, again, as we look at potential resolutions or solutions, whether we have to ask the community for support or not, that a byproduct of what this could turn out to be is we're gonna have to raise up our class sizes, I mean, it is what it is,
If I could take a minute and replace the capacity analysis you had, the numbers haven't changed, but this is just a more legible copy. I noticed that the yellow shading or the lighter shading on these copies did not turn
Oh,
out.
the yellow.
Are these all just one?
No, just take one and.
Take one,
Take
okay.
one and pass them
There you go.
around, and take one and pass it around. So one's without and one's
Oh,
with, going the separate ways.
I was wondering if there was two in the stack, so this is the width that's going that way.
Yeah, so the lighter shading, all you're seeing is when it hits the maximum or above, you weren't really seeing the shading on the above desirable, but not yet. So the lighter shading is where it's above desirable. No shading means it's at desirable or below. Lighter shading is between desirable and maximum, and then the darker shading is above maximum. So the numbers are still the same, it's just a lot easier to see that. So I thought you'd be better off with a better copy
Back to the issue
there.
of encouraging early registration. Can we, I don't think we tell people why we want them to register early. So when you start doing that in January, can we maybe add some explanation as to, this will help determine class sizes for hiring and this is why we really need to know this now.
They definitely did that at a group.
Did they?
We told them
During
to,
kindergarten
I
night.
haven't looked at what they said now.
Okay. I was just thinking because, or even in some of the print stuff that you would see in the Times or wherever, an explanation would be, some people are going to wait.
Get in early.
Anyway, but
Get in early.
Guarantee your spot. Reach
Well, and it can be a lot of times, it could be the people who already have children in the district. And it's like, why rush? Kids going to school,
Right.
It's not like the first time kindergarten parent who's there like the morning of and got all the documents.
No, Dr. Wook stressed it to PTO, she stressed it on kindergarten night. Go make sure your neighbors know, talk to people in the supermarket about
Again, with
it.
Edgar Rhodes, and again, maybe it's due to her overemphasis on communication, but their kindergarten projection was 77, and by the 1st of May, they were already at 72.
Wow.
So I was like, oh gosh.
So you got new neighbors.
So I'm hoping they're not getting a ton more, but they were almost there compared to the other schools that normally see a little bit more steady trickle over the summer. It was like,
It's like you got neighbors, take them the welcome cookies with a note saying, contact the district if your kids are going to go to school.
Well, and to the point about housing, houses in that area, I live in that area and they turn over quickly, and it's an affordable place to live, and so you're going to get, I'm just not surprised that those numbers keep going up.
I know. Well, and again, kind of what Charles' data showed, I think you remember that there was over 100 more births in that community over the past 5 years than in the Avery attendance area.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So one of the things, so as it relates to this particular, the work of this committee, Bruce and I had spoken, originally I guess the thought was for me, and wanted to hear what you all thought today, was for me to lead this particular process. But, when we were speaking, we were talking about just all that could be involved with this particular committee, and thinking it might be best to have somebody facilitate it. From transparency is probably not the right word, but hearing the voice of all the stakeholders who come to the table, and then just thinking about some of the possible passion that comes with things like boundary lines and stuff like that being on the table, just the amount of time that it could take to respond to a lot of people. So that was kind of what our thinking was. Curious on your thoughts, but
Like, for example, who would that be?
probably finding somebody, probably trying to contract with somebody who could do that. We talked internally.
Are there people who do that?
Yeah,
Just do that?
yeah. And it's, because one of the things also that's tied to on, superintendent goals, I put board goals, is also this year looking at the strategic plan, having somebody facilitate that. So it's there would be two people that I'm not necessarily, I think it's worthwhile to have people facilitate, but, and be reasonable with costs and stuff like that, but it's certainly not something we like doing a lot of that.
Well, just like our
You know?
superintendent searches or things like that, a lot of times we work with outside organizations because we want them to appear nonpartisan to it, because they don't have any skin in the game, and somebody else outside leading it keeps things on task, and they don't influence one way or the other, because they're not property owners, they don't have kids in the district, they're not an employee of the district, they're not a board member or whatever. So if they're the ones that are kind of leading the show, I think that would send a good message to have somebody that would, and if, that way we don't overtask somebody who's already got their plate full as an employee of the district or superintendent of the district, whatever, to then say, now you got to take on this whole big process and lead it as well. So I'm not opposed to having somebody outside come in and lead that.
Well, if there were some things that were off the table, then it would be probably a little bit more cut and dry. A little bit, if it was like no boundary lines, no this, well then it's like, okay, it's probably a little bit less involved, a little bit less. But so, any other thoughts though? I don't want to.
The other thing that if it's, I'm not opposed to that, but having people within our own group do that, and then, if we say we're going to be as honest as we're going to be, that should lend a little more credibility to the current group that's here.
Yeah.
Rather than, pass it off to somebody else, and because I know what people will think immediately about that. And I think it would, number one, we're saving money. Number two, we're trying to, and if you present all the information like we've talked about today, and this is how we've gotten there, and that people really perceive the need and see the need, I think that's lends credibility.
So are you saying that you would prefer it to be done in-house because it provides credibility for our administrators?
And the board, yes. I know it's going to be very difficult. It's a very complex thing. It's very labor intensive.
Yeah.
That would be the only drawback of not doing it in-house, because it's going to be very labor intensive.
I definitely see Arnold's point and probably agree with it too.
I was actually talking about more of the facilitator, the one that just kind of drives the calendar and keeps the group on task. But the participants, I think, obviously have to be central to our district. I don't think you can take somebody who's not here and judge what the community feelings are if they're not part of the community. I just thought that somebody that would be taking the takeaway from each meeting, the analyzing any data, whether they're the ones facilitating it, that maybe that can, because it is labor intensive, that can be done by somebody, outside.
I was just going to comment that my reservation about bringing in somebody from outside is that I think you guys have really good ideas, and I wouldn't want those to be, I don't want to lose those. But what Steve's suggesting, more of somebody to just guide the process, but you all are providing, you guys are still sort of the brains behind it, but yeah. But if we were to do something like that, I think it would be really important to have a lot of community input and others' input, and who is selected to do that, because I do think there'll be some people who just won't like it right off the bat.
So I would still be, regardless of who facilitates, outside or inside, I would still be involved. I kind of designed this originally thinking that I was going to be facilitating the whole thing, but in thinking about it, a question, again, my ability to do everything else that's going to be involved this year and respond. I still see myself, like I listed these dates for the forums, like I see myself facilitating those forums, listening to people, being involved.
And at least one of us at each one of those too.
Yeah.
In fact, more than one of us if we can.
Yeah, as you're able to do it, yeah.
So people like him.
We can't stretch Bruce too thin. We'll maximize Bruce as much as we can, for sure.
I think the Bruce Eller Appreciation Society meets at least once a week.
I saw as much Dr. Simpson as
Can we get one of those cardboard cutouts of Bruce? Like put him around the district?
Bill Sinney.
So I see myself still kind of,
They were all mentioned by name.
doing that, but there are certain people who do facilitate this type of work. So we could think about internal candidates, but again, it's going to have to be somebody who can. Again, if you want me to do it, I can do it. But somebody who's going to have the time to invest in all the emails, all the things, you know, and ultimately going to present,
Why
you know.
don't you get some information about what options there are, what the role, what the scope of their role would be, what the cost would be?
Yeah.
Because I don't think we know enough right now. I think
Okay.
you're hearing our
Okay.
pros and cons.
I think it's okay to investigate that. I'm
To
not saying
investigate.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying that we're necessarily even going to finally come down to agreeing to do that.
Yeah.
But if we know what level of involvement they will take, and, you know, because obviously the more involved they're going to be, the
Sure.
more it's going to cost to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they're going to be corresponding with 15 people who constantly email them back and forth, they're going to take time, and you'll pay for that.
Yeah,
Does that sound okay with you, Arnold?
Absolutely.
Just to investigate.
okay. Okay.
All right.
So we kind of, we won't go through the timeline, but you saw what the timeline was there. Our goal is to ultimately get whatever we feel are the recommendations, draft recommendations, we're calling them, prepared by December. At that point, to have a community forum or forums, one or two, where we share. And then we also, not just at that forum, because not everybody comes to forums, also put it out to the community to give their feedback and input. And then the draft thinking right now is to have a meeting like this in early January, where the board gets to hear it, ask questions, give you a little simmer time, and then in the end of January, come back and decide, you know, what do we want to do? You know, what are going to be our next steps?
So whatever's presented at those forums can be made available on the website,
Absolutely.
or, you know, as a PowerPoint
Absolutely,
or whatever
we
it
will
might be.
over communicate it,
Yeah.
and so that you're also hearing that what we recommend, and this is what the community's said as it relates to it.
Do we have you provided who's going to be on the committee, or how's it going to be selected?
No, so that's one of the things is going to have to, again, solicit through our different channels, including the Times, committee members for it. Not wanting to make, so thinking through representative of different cities, representatives of different ages, representative of public school, private school, trying to have as diverse a group as we possibly can, but not wanting to make it, in my opinion, just come one, come all.
Right.
Because you're going to be involved in a very focused, concentrated, problem-solving, creative process. So we still want to hear from everybody, but as far as the people having a table like this that are people that are doing it, and certainly having, you know, one or two board reps to be a part of it, if you guys feel that appropriate.
The group that you've already had a couple meetings with, or at least one, because I know we talked about one of the meetings that was first part of June, maybe that first Monday. What was that? Did that result in this?
Arnold, John, Bruce, and Emerson.
Okay.
So we looked at, our purpose was like, what other data exists? You know, not to make any kind of recommendation or anything like that.
Right.
But, you know, what other data exists, you know, verifying, you know, does it, you know, and we had the enrollment projections and stuff
Right.
like that. But kind of what Arnold talked about, you know, like looking at non-resident staff, looking at waivers
Right.
and stuff like that. Clearly, the data shows that, you know, there's some, you know, chunks. We have 95 waiver, we had. They're reducing as we speak, but certain number of waivers, certain number of other movement. And so that certainly highlights the need to bring those to the table as we're talking about a more comprehensive resolution.
So that group was not going to evolve into this group.
Not necessarily, but I
Okay.
would love, you know, probably not all of us, but if Arnold wanted to continue or.
And this is
Emerson
the,
wanted to continue even though he went off the board.
Yeah.
this is the last Wednesday, September enrollment, last Wednesday, January enrollment, resident district enrollment projections, resident district enrollment actual, enrollments during the summer, withdrawals during the summer, enrollments after the first day of school, withdrawals after the first day of school, VIC enrollment, students enrolled but not attending, students of non-resident staff enrolled, students from normative Riverview, students only participating in a district program, students enrolled via residency waiver, students transferred from an elementary school, transferred to an elementary school, resident students attending SSD school, students attending private schools, occupancy permits, district registered voters, census data, building enrollment capacity data. That's all the data that we tried to generate
Right.
just to say, okay, now what do we do with it? Now let's look at this.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
I'll put on my
I appreciate that.
Well, and that's why I asked whether or not that was the committee that was kind of continuous. I mean, I would love to participate on that, but I also knew that you only could have, or needed to have a few people on that one
Yeah.
to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to put on my school attorney hat for just a second. That committee is a board-appointed directed committee, so their meetings will all be subject to the Sunshine Act, so they need to be posted, take minutes and all of that stuff. Which is good, because we want, again, transparency.
Okay. You mean the one that we're creating?
The one you're creating,
Okay.
yeah.
So then we would have the representatives, kind of like facilities and finance, be approved by you all.
They don't have to be, but
Okay.
the meetings do need to be public.
Okay.
meetings. I'm happy to approve them, but.
Yeah.
And that way, keep those minutes on the website and all of that. That way, anybody can see at any time what's
Got
happening.
it. Got it. Yeah. Bruce, do you want to talk about the funding piece?
We know the piece that will then, after we get finished with the facilities work and identifying all of the needs, we know the next thing is developing some kind of a funding plan for it. If you just take one and pass it around. And so I wanted to give just a snapshot of what those potential funding sources are right now as they currently exist, as a combination of operating budget funds that are currently dedicated toward facility projects, as well as what the district's current no tax increase bonding capacity is, and then what the bonding capacity, what the legal bonding capacity is, just kind of give you an idea of the broad parameters. Right now, the operating budget has about $1.3 million in it for facilities projects. A lot of the money, a lot of that is one-time money that was just kind of put there as we received full funding of the foundation formula, as we picked up a couple other positive developments since April when the preliminary budget was looked at. Between there and the final budget in June, the picture brightened a little, and we put that extra money into facilities projects, knowing all of the things that were on the facilities condition assessment that needed to be addressed, at least kind of give us some funds to begin that process. So we have $1.3 million in it this year. Next year, about $900,000. The year after that, about $600,000. So over the next 3 years, we have about $3 million in the operating budget and our projections for facility projects. Facilities capital projects can sometimes be funded by lease purchase as well. Most of the time, those have to be most of the time those are energy savings related. You go into an energy savings kind of a contract, and the energy savings through efficiency projects, that savings then helps pay for the investment in the equipment itself through a lease purchase. That's probably not going to be a significant source of funding for the district because we've already done the conversion to LED lighting. We already have mechanical controls on our HVAC equipment and building schedules and zoning and all of that kind of thing. We do have some windows that could be replaced, doors that could be replaced, some other kind of longer payback kinds of items that could be more efficient, but not so efficient that it justifies the investment in it. And so the payback on those really wouldn't generate enough funds to be significant from a lease purchase standpoint. So the other funding source that's available outside of operating funds is bonding. The district's done a lot of work the last few years to try to put the district's debt service fund and the bonding capacity on a solid foundation and in better shape going forward. That's been successful through a combination of the refinancing of some of our existing debt this past December, also transferring some fund balances in past years from the operating funds or the building fund over to the debt service fund. And so that's put us in a position, along with a nice reassessment increase in our assessed valuation through reassessment, put the district in a position to have a significant amount of no tax bonding capacity available on a no tax increase basis. when you look at that, you can kind of, you can approach that in two ways. You can either maximize the amount of the bond issue right up front to take care, to utilize all projected future resources as long as possible. And that's kind of your one-time max out, no tax increase bond issue. And then what that does is it gives you the maximum amount of money immediately, but then you don't have any no tax increase bonding capacity for a long time because you've used that all up right up front. The other way is then to not to max that out on a one-time basis, but essentially phase it in, take a portion of it, and then have another portion available a few years later, and then kind of have a cycle that can be sustainable over time. And if we staged it based on what our current debt service levy is, our assessed valuation with just a modest assumption of growth, and where our debt service fund balances are right now and the cash flow needs of that, we stage it in, we have available $12.9 million of no tax increase bonding capacity available currently, and then we would have about $8.5 million every 4 to 5 years after that. So over the 10-year period, which is the period of the facility's condition assessment, it was a 10-year projection of needs over that time. So to mirror that, this would be about almost $30 million available if we phased it in over time instead of just doing a one-shot maximum. So it gives us about $8 million more over a 10-year period than trying to do it all up front. In terms of going past that, the tax increase bonding capacity, every 1 cent of the district's debt service levy generates about $80,000. That $80,000 is enough to support about $1.1 million of bond issue if we start looking at it at the tax increase. That's kind of the components that we'll have to work with once we get the comprehensive list and what the non-discretionary price tag is, and then what the priorities are among all of the non-discretionary items. And we'll just have to make, there'll be a judgment that would have to be made of how important are all of these items, and whether the no tax increase bonding capacity along with the operating budget can fund what is considered the essential items, maybe the non-discretionary plus the highest priority of the discretionary items, and then what then those discretionary items that fall below that no tax increase funding line, are those compelling enough to take to the community to ask for additional resources or not?
Well put.
It's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Excited about it. Anything else there?
Are we wrapping up on this agenda?
I think so.
All right, let's take a 5-minute break. Reconvene.
Good. Send me that electronically, Bruce, and I'll send that to David, or you can just forward it to David.
Like all of these materials, so they have a website? Yeah. Okay, good.
Oh, you mean like this?
All of it. In Board Docs.
Usually when it's presented to the board like this, bye.
We're gonna go out and eat now.
Usually when, if it's ever passed through.
10:30 in the morning.
Communication,
Yeah.
survey, all of that.
Oh, yeah, that's in
Okay.
there. That's in there. This is not in this percent.
I just, because I don't keep paper copies.
Definitely.
And
Yeah.
if I can get.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's that lady with that?
Kathy, who is with Pat? Oh, wait, Lord.
Wanted to know her name.
Yeah, what's her name?
She's been here before. It's her neighbor.
Oh, Renee Evans.
Do you want me to go look?
Remind me. No, I turned that back on. Just remind me that.
Turn it off.
Yeah. And there's two. I didn't press pause before I pressed stop. So there'll be a couple, I don't know how that gets transferred and put online, but.
All right. Shall we push through?
Yeah.
Okay. Board goals and priorities.
So what I had done for this was just, again, just kind of having a draft to get started. A possible board goals priority for this upcoming year, based on things that had been from the past as well as work that was going to be undertaken this year. I think probably a more narrow focus, the better. Not probably going beyond 3 to 4 is what I would recommend, but this isn't meant to be just a list for you to choose from, but thinking through goals and priorities for next year.
I like these, and I think we need to have a student achievement priority.
I agree.
I mean, I think that has to be
Number
our
one.
number one priority, and then all of these support that. But I think we should articulate it.
The line where it says develop and nurture meaningful and supportive relationships with community members, I would also add and leaders. We talked about reaching out to, and we mentioned it earlier as far as talked about engaging some of the other city leadership, because I think if at a time when we go to the community to say, hey, we would really like your support on fill in the blank number of no tax increase bond, getting their leadership to help lead that going forward and say, hey, look, we've talked with the folks at the Webster Groves School District and their board, and this is what they're wanting to do, and this is why they could be a very influential ally to us with their own communities, the voting members of their communities, whether or not they even know anything about our district, the members of the communities, they can be very influential.
Amy, what were your thoughts on what you mentioned? Because I know in bullet point 4, it does talk about supported learning environments for students, but I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying. Because I had some alternative wording to suggest, just for the first part of that bullet point, to, rather than creating anti-racist, anti-biased, do more equitable, bias-free. What everybody else thinks about that.
I like that. Yeah, I would like to see the board's goal is, and then something related to student achievement. And then we will accomplish that by, and then have all of these, or not accomplish, but we will work toward that by doing these other things.
So we're to come up with these goals at this meeting?
Well, it could be whatever, I mean, if you want to, I don't think there's a mandated date to come up with them, but the sooner the better, because we'll,
Right,
focus on.
Because the year started.
Yeah.
Would it be better worded to say revisit the district strategic plan? Because I know that we had a fairly lengthy process
Yeah.
that we want.
Well, and the goal for that this year is to go through a similar process, but my goal with that was to be a little bit more, again, aggressive in the timeline, so still be comprehensive and inclusive, but
Right. I
not
agree
to
with-
have it be a multi-year.
I
type
agree with the
process.
focus part of it, because I thought that the last time
It's too big.
it seemed like we spent months just going through wordsmithing what the goals of the plan were going to be. It got to where it's like, oh, if we'd spend 2 more hours talking about, and listening to a couple very well-intentioned people argue about what word is purposeful versus this, and it's like, get on with it, let's go.
Yeah,
Focused and action,
yeah.
Christine and I both attended the parent equity group at the high school. And I know there's talk just among that group to perhaps try to revamp Webster Challenge and work with Kersey and some other people in doing that. There's also thought of changing the term basically a focus on opportunities for kids. And so kind of what I was thinking was, in addressing and maybe adding leaders, building that relationship, can we then kind of start getting into some mentorships? Can we start developing programs within the community where the kids have opportunities to do different things? I mean, that's, you know, I don't know all the,
Yeah.
you know, but my thought is there seems to be, the sentiment seems to be that there's not enough opportunity for different things. So as part of this commitment to challenging and supporting, is there room to create more opportunities for kids to do things? Is
We're-
that something
Yeah,
that...
I was wondering about, was it just from that meeting? Like, or is
It's
that?
not just from the meeting, that was the most recent.
Okay.
That's the most recent.
I'd be curious to hear some more specific items as far as what they would be looking for, whether it be community programs that are open to all students of every, you know, whatever, no matter what school they go to, not just in our district, but private school kids or, you know, any of the other
Well, for this
educational
particular group,
organizations.
of course, it would just be the high, I mean, this particular group is concerned with the
Right.
high school.
Right.
The general sentiment from what I hear seems to be for all kids. But if you're going to look at the academic gap or the achievement gap, if you will, then I think what they want to do is create, and if we're going to talk specifically at the high school, then they want to create more opportunities that they feel would help close that. gap.
Targeted specifically
Yeah,
at that
target-
9 through 12 grade level.
So
And
is
then there was also talk too of, I mean, of course, there's discipline and there's all kinds of, you know, out of school suspension, eliminating that. And again, that the conversation kind of went back to like Grace's restorative circles, and there's a lot of interest in that. There's a lot of interest in maybe attacking, not attack is not the right word. Focusing on counseling and restorative circles and things of that nature rather than, you know what I mean, just kind of revamping how we deal and look at kids from a discipline point of view in addition to, I mean, obviously some things are egregious, yeah, you gotta, but then things that aren't, and then what's egregious and what's not. I mean, obviously that gets into...
Because the equity and
Yeah.
education piece is a K, well, it's a pre-K through 12 focus, whereas that seems to be a little more targeted to a certain school or a certain more finite age group.
Well, that's this particular group, yes.
Yes,
This particular
yeah.
group, absolutely. On a broader, you know, obviously we want to start, if you start in kindergarten and everybody's getting along great, then as
Right.
they get older, hopefully, they will take those lessons with them and maybe we can start.
Do you think as a board, we can, whereas it's not necessarily an action item for us, but more to encourage groups at all levels to approach things like that, and, you know, as we can participate in there? I mean, I'm not sure, I don't know how that relates to our board.
Well,
as a
I guess
goal.
I'm presenting it as a question.
Yeah,
How can
right.
we
Affect that.
support, affect,
Yeah.
what have you, those groups, those
Right.
programs, those what have you? How can we do that?
Would that be, I mean, the goal of demonstrating a commitment to creating anti-bias, racist learning environment?
That's what I was.
To me,
Yeah.
that's what that
That's what I'm looking at.
includes.
As far as under bullet point 4, yeah, that would be one of the .I, .double I, .triple I, you know, things that fall within that.
Mhm.
So So we're moving towards, and John's better able to speak to it, having more. They do a lot of different things. We've advanced social, emotional health, well-being at the high school in recent history, and we are looking to how do we take some of the stuff, that's being done as far as like some of the restored aspects to the high school. The opportunities piece, one of the things that I think that's neat that Edgar Rhodes, I don't know if they started this past year, mainly based on economic need, is looking at access to opportunities that some have and some don't have. When I went to who did I hear speak? I don't remember who I heard speak. Oh, it was Wright Edelman, legendary, at the opening of the Deaconess Center for Child Wellbeing. She said a child should never be reminded of that they're poor when they come to school. School should never be the reminder to the kid. And just thinking about all the different times we ask people for money, or we put the burden on the person who doesn't have the money to ask for support, And I know one of the things that Edgar Road did this year that doesn't fully take care of that, but at least what Julie said, and you can, and if I'm misrepresenting, but every single, if you. And I don't know how they targeted people, or people just self-selected, that everything, you just cut everything in half. So if there was a t-shirt, spirit wear, it was $10 shirt, it became a $5 shirt. Or if it was, do you know any more about that? Or not?
No, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I can speak to it.
Okay. So that, I don't know, just when you said opportunities, I didn't know if that was it, or it was under an umbrella.
I mean, that would be an example. More so, and I don't know enough about this to speak about it either, I just remember hearing something, so hopefully I'm not misrepresenting it, but like at Avery, didn't like every third grader get an instrument, or they got like a violin, or there was some sort of push, I don't know, I guess I'm assuming they fundraised or they did something to where like every third grader got a violin, much to the chagrin of some of the teachers. But there was some push that, and those are the kind of things that I'm referring to. Like, I mean, a teacher is great, but if you have an opportunity to learn a musical instrument, that has much more, to me, an effect. So, and again, I should probably look into that a little bit more. I just remember hearing something about that.
I wasn't at the meeting, but I know there were some things like getting into algebra in 7th grade, or getting into foreign languages at middle school, and then how that tracks up through high school. Those things I think were tried to be eliminated or modified, or to make sure everybody knew, because it seemed like there were only a few people that knew, and then if you were on the know, that you knew and you got in. But if you didn't know, you didn't know. So those were, I think, over the past year, I think those were discussed, weren't they? And changed.
Yeah. Everybody has the opportunity to take. Now, we still have, for the algebra example, like we still have assessments that are given, but anybody can do the algebra course. Now, the one thing is that if the data, the data that shows, the child's not necessarily doing as well from these data points in math, they could do the algebra, but they also have to take kind of a second, they have to use their elective, which is kind of tough. But if you really want to take the algebra, even though the data is showing that maybe you're best to take the grade level math program, you can do that, but you also got to take this other math class, so you're kind of getting a double math. So, but it used to be exclusive just to the kids who scored a certain level.
It was just a question. It was as far as this bullet point is, how can we? Is there a way that we can support some of these programs? At the schools, institute. I don't know. How do you?
Well, from the goals that you set, typically a little bit more broad, that creates focus for us. So then we kind of are the ones that will develop plans, strategies, report on different things, and then come back to you for your feedback too on other ideas that could be tried.
So to Amy's point, I wrote this up,
Thank you. I was trying to find something on MSBA's website.
and the first word could change, and I have two things of this. Nurture and enhance the achievement of all students academically, or nurture and enhance the academic achievement of all students. Nurturing being encouraging, developing, because some of these words are used here, engaging, and then enhancing, pushing farther. That's how I would use the word enhance. So.
Is that to be an additional goal, or is that replacing a goal?
It's up for discussion.
And I don't know if it's of or it's for. I always have to look that up, the grammatical. Of all students or for all students. I think it's of.
Academic achievement. Say it again.
Academic achievement of all students.
Will you say the whole thing?
Nurture and enhance the academic achievement of all students.
It's of.
I think you nurture in, I think you enhance. I don't know.
Say it again.
I think you nurture achievement in students, don't you? Use the word nurture.
Do you like the word nurture? Or?
Didn't you use the word nurture?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nurture
But I think you
in
nurture
and
in and
enhance
enhance of,
Oh.
don't you? Sorry, I was a French
You're
major,
asking-
not an
I'm
English.
asking the wrong person too.
English was not
I'm
my
trying to find.
strong
I'm
subject.
trying to find something a little less touchy-feely than nurture.
Yeah.
Mm.
Let me go to one more.
Sorry.
Encourage? Or is that still touchy-feely?
I think what we really want to do is we want to ensure that all students are learning every day, in every subject, right? And
I think you
that's-
want to support and challenge student achievement.
Support? Definitely.
Foster. Cultivate. Promote. Strengthen. Enrich. Instill.
Enrich, I like enrich. Enrich, foster, promote.
Promote. Stimulate. Cherish.
I feel like when I was reading through some of these comments, and when I've read comments that I shouldn't read online, people have connected what is probably likely in this fourth bullet point and counter it with achievement, like, oh, we're either
Yes.
doing this
Yes.
or we're doing this.
Yes.
So I don't know how we can address that, and I'm just seeing it, but I don't know if putting them together is the best thing, or do we purposefully separate them, like saying we're doing this and we're doing this? Because part of me thinks that what we're doing is, whatever the word is, we're supporting and challenging student achievement in an anti-racist and anti-biased environment that encourages all students to succeed.
Well, and I see it again as
Right.
this is how we promote student achievement, because students can't achieve if they are in a racist environment. You know, like I see this is all part of it.
But I could see it as separate too, because if you're working to build an anti-racist, anti-biased community. What you're really talking about is building a healing community for students, but also building a community that allows all students to understand the assets of their culture, but also, I would hope, challenge them to learn about the assets of other cultures. So
I like the term that was used earlier when to replace anti-racist / anti-bias with just bias-free. Because I think that's, while I don't want to soften the message, I think it's a more tactful, maybe it's a little more tactful way of saying that.
It's more
Because-
positive.
Pardon?
It's more positive.
Yeah, I agree. I think it just has a more positive tone to it.
I always, and again, it brings criticism, and I get the points, you know, I always go to learning could be measured by achievement, but achievement couldn't be measured by learning. How schools are traditionally categorized as achieving and not are kids. So for example, I could have a child that can ace tests, but really could have aced the test at the start of the year, but they're categorized as achieving. Or you could have a kid that, you know, yeah, you could look at value added, but who doesn't maybe do well on the test, but learned a tremendous amount. So I usually bend towards the learning, which whatever, you know, does bring sometimes me criticism, and I don't want to make it seem like the absence of having kids do well and perform well. I'm not trying to do that, but I'm feeling like if you really focus on helping them to learn, to push, to do whatever, they'll achieve to their, you know, whatever they're.
So learning rather than achieving.
Well,
So
student
focusing on
learning.
learning.
Yeah, I mean, but
Well,
again, that's.
To that end, maximize the learning of all students, wherever they are.
Yeah.
Then, you know, I understand exactly what you're saying. Kind of to Christine's point, and in reading some of those same comments, that, and I know John and I have had this conversation, that if an equity understanding is an overlay on top of academics and expected to be, my words, panacea for learning, it may or may not happen, because some learning things are inherent to the individual. There are some equitable things or things that cause learning not to take place to the level that it could because of the environment or because of situations going on. So, you know, knowing where some community people are, they're together on those things. Knowing where some community people are, they're apart from those things. One is more of a intellectual kind of thing. The other are social-emotional kinds of things, but they do intersect. And maybe they need to be approached separately and down the road, you know, combined together. Or combine together and say we're going to deal with these separately, but we're going to bring them back together. But whatever it is, I think that has to be communicated effectively to everybody in the district so they know what the focus is, and so parents know what the focus is.
Well, and
If I take what I heard from the Equity and Education Committee, and I don't know, I think you were there at the committee, but I heard a teacher say, how are these goals being communicated to teachers, and how are they being assessed, and or how are we looking at them regularly? Like, do we know why we're teaching kids to have an understanding of others? Do teachers understand why they're teaching kids this? And maybe what I heard was not all teachers do have an understanding of why, which is probably why it's in the community, that people don't understand why we're doing this, and they just see them as an extra layer.
Well, and what metric are we going to use
To measure.
to measure that it is effective or they are learning it? Because a lot of people don't like assessment scores. Okay, well, what metric is going to be used then to measure learning? You know, what are you going to use? It has to be something that's reliable, it has to be something that's valid too, not just I think it happens.
Yeah.
Or I think they've learned whatever.
That's a good point, because I always use this example. My daughter graduated magna cum laude, but she sucks at taking tests. I mean, she gets test anxiety, she has all these things. She sucks at taking tests. So if you were to just go by her test scores, she'd be down here. But she was a student. So that's a good question. Like, there's those people that I was a good guesser, I guess. I I did great at taking tests, but I'd go to class and fall asleep. So, how do you? There are those people that fall in between those. How do you measure whether or not we're achieving our goals? That's a good question.
Well, and so that's, I just looked at my notes. But what a teacher was saying, that teachers wanted to know what they're supposed to teach and how, and they also wanted to know how staff are held accountable and held accountable in an ongoing way.
For academics?
That was in the EIE meeting.
Oh,
That's what it said.
so we're talking, but are we talking about academics, or are we talking about equitable kinds of things?
I think they were talking about equitable. I think we were talking about equitable.
I sure hope they wouldn't ask that question about academics.
Right, no, right.
And I think that's the problem when you separate them, is that unfortunately, some teachers may see it as another thing to do.
Right.
It's something else to do. And so why am I having to do this? What
Right.
purpose? How is it assessed? What does it mean for me? So then it becomes personalized that I would like to see what this means to me with regard to my job. Is it a part of my evaluation? Is how will you assess if I'm being equitable in my classroom? This is a goal, but what does it look like for me versus how is this goal, achieving this goal, supporting kids in their learning? Does that make sense? So when we sometimes make them separate, it appears that way, it's separate. Like this doesn't have anything to do with the other thing because this is another thing on my plate and you're not taking anything else off. And I don't know how I don't know that you can do one without the other, right? All kids need to be safe. And sometimes teachers don't have the perspective of some kids who are not safe because of inequities, wherever they exist. And so in order to be safe, then you need these pieces. So they're really, in some instances, they have to be intertwined for the child and for the adult, right? Because for the adult that doesn't get it, it's another thing to do.
Right.
Well, not to use a baking analogy, but to use one. If there are elements...
Not to use one.
I didn't want to get anybody's stomach growling.
All right, I'll grab another bag.
But if you think about baking a cake, and if an ingredient is left out,
Yeah.
what it does to the total product, you just throw it away. You won't eat it. And, so all of them together form the basis for what we want to see happen. But you have to have flour, you have to have sugar, you have to have baking powder, and you have to. Do I have enough? And you have to talk about it and then put it into the mix of the whole. So people who eat the cake, they just eat the cake. They don't know exactly what goes into it. But the staff are the bakers. And they need to know how much they're putting in and how it all relates to each other.
So how can we as a board support that?
We encourage the administration.
But what does it look like in terms of a goal here?
All right, I'm just throwing out some words. Our goal could be to promote and nurture an academic community where students are learning every day. Maybe all students are learning every day.
Where's the equity or the safe in that?
It's inherent in that.
It's inherent in that, and then we articulate with these bullets or some version of it,
What that means.
what that means.
In other words, that's the
Just
cake.
for every student to
That's the
be-
cake, that's what I'm trying to just describe
Right.
as the cake.
But is it in words somewhere?
It will be in words.
Okay.
I'm just throwing this out.
No,
I hear you dictate.
yeah. Would you read that again, please?
To promote and nurture an academic community where all students are learning every day.
So that could be like the overall header, and then under that maybe
Yes.
is just these things we're going to focus on this year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the cake, it's not what we want.
If
I
kids
think
aren't
that's the
learning every
question.
day, then that's a problem.
But how do you measure that? It's a great goal, but how do you measure that I mean, because in theory, every day you go to school, In theory, you're
One of the
learning.
ways we'll measure it is if we have employed high-quality staff reflective of our student population. I think
Okay.
these, some of the measures are going to be in the specifics.
Okay.
Because a lot of it, ultimately, and that's one of the things we talked about the last time around with my goal on the whole challenging students, stretching students conversation, as we talked about, you know, how do you ensure all kids, I mean, are doing that? And so some of it's going to have to come through asking the kids, asking the families. The kids are probably the best, but, you know, ranking where they are. Like, I was thinking through like a multi-survey next year about where people felt in terms of that level of challenge or certain aspects of their education or their children's education. Because again, it might not show up on a score, no matter what score that is. But we know that we are trying to still, it doesn't mean we're not attending to scores and trying to increase performance in areas, and so how do we communicate that? But personally, you know, you really just have to ask, or you're the teacher that knows, you know.
You can't challenge somebody that doesn't want to be challenged.
Got to try to create the environment
Exactly.
where they're challenged,
Yeah,
they're
and
willing to be challenged.
That's, and this kind of may overlap a little bit, but that's an interesting perspective because the environment can be there. Everything can be there, all the resources. And if any of that breaks down, and if the staff member, whether it's the teacher or the principal, is not implementing to the degree that they can, that could be one breakdown. Or if the student just decides, you know, I'm not going to, you know, or it's one of those teach me kind of deals. But I think sometimes you ask the student, because everything can appear to be fine, but it could be in total dysfunction for the student.
That's where it goes back to, I think every student needs someone they connect with. Or at least that should be your goal. Which gives you school safety, which hopefully improves everything.
Could be a part of a survey. Is there one adult that you could go to with?
You know, there were walkthroughs that were popular, you know, 12, 15 years ago. And they did have a lot of validity and strength to them. There were some drawbacks to them, but you know, there are times you would ask students in the process of a lesson when they were independent study what they were learning, if they could articulate back to you, rather than just observe what was going on or talk to the teacher. You were talking to the students and getting direct feedback from them. Why did, you know, explain this to me, explain what you're doing. So then you really understand that they are either, they know it or they have no clue about what it is.
Yeah.
I also think ways of measurement is looking at the number of students, the minority students that are in your reading interventions. Did that number decline? Your discipline, you know, has that number declined? I think also was your assessments, whatever you use, NWEA, MAP, Fontes Infinite, whatever you utilize, but are those students showing their own personal growth? As a principal, we used to do that. If we had kids that we wondered about, we tracked them. I hate that word, but we did for that year, right? So where are they in August? We did some assessments. Where were they in December? We did some, so you kind of look and see if they're making progress. And that's the information that you provide to the teacher for him or her to know, okay, yeah, what I'm doing is working because of some things I put into place to have more equity in my space. My kids are now, it's evident in these factors because my kids are challenged. They want to be here and they are doing better in that space. So I think there's a number of informal, formal district level and building level types of assessments that could be utilized that can support, you know, and then the soft things that you can't really assess through an assessment, right? The student surveys. I like coming to my classroom. I feel valued in my space, you know, those types of things. Really looking at how these students of color or whomever are answering some of those questions.
Because there was the equity assessment that was done 2 years ago? Should be coming up for another round now.
And I've got another one that's really good, really in depth. that the university used that I was thinking. They've got one for students, faculty, and they got one for students and one for faculty, and it's really sound. I'll share it with you all just to look at.
So in terms of board, the overriding goal being the K or students learning, I view that as being like the tip of the pyramid. And we're going to say, we're at the very tip, and we're going to say, okay, these are the things the board is going to commit to working on this year, and they're going to be the things that we school it. But then our success ultimately depends on John meeting his goals, right? And his staff meeting their goals, and on down the pyramid. So I think it's for our purposes, I think it needs to be very high level. And then there will be measurables. It's just
The measurables will be developed by the lower levels.
exactly.
Right.
Thank you.
That's lower, but I mean
In the pyramid, yeah.
lower part of the pyramid.
Yeah.
Right.
So, John, you wrote these?
I drafted it.
So, I know that anti-racist, anti-biased is a thing, right? Like it's at Crossroads and it's at other places. What did you mean when you wrote it? Or how can we support that?
So what I did with that is I tried to encompass with that statement, again, looking at, continued work with equity, which we started last year, which will continue, kind of the board's goal of let's come up with something related to challenging all kids. And then again, support of looking at all aspects of support of kids from a social emotional standpoint or whatever. So it was kind of like a catch-all thing. My use of the language of anti-racist, anti-bias was to, and it came from the Crossroads folks of just kind of being explicit, just being explicit with the language. So that's why I had included it. But I do think that could, that some of that language can be present under the header that Amy had shared too. I don't think it lessens it to describe this is what that type of environment looks like. We are an academic institution as schools, so I'm okay with that. But then, what does it look like?
So I would even say the board's goal is this: to achieve this goal during the 2018-2019 school year, the Board of Education will.
That's fine with me. That's kind of deal.
Are those things we need to just do now, or?
Well, I think starting from the list we have, it sounds like we need to do some work on number 4. We need to have a conversation about maybe that language. Only one I'm not crazy about, and I'm going to sound like a jerk for saying it, but that last one. Am I a jerk?
You're definitely.
I don't hate people. Just an introvert.
Well, if you think
that one's just hard.
But if you think about it, you said the city has reached out,
Yes.
right? And we do want to, and we just wrote that somewhere in the.
Yes.
So we are wanting to do that.
How about, language to encourage and continue to develop relationships with community members and leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as it's not the wording so much, just as do we want it as a goal, but all right.
Do we want it what? I'm
As a
sorry.
goal.
As a goal?
Yeah.
Well,
To me,
if
it's
you,
We're
more
doing
of
it.
a-
well, if you add something to the effect of for the good of our students, you know what I'm saying? Like, because that's
Even
why
though
we're
Amy's so
doing
short-offered, we'll try.
I do think it is a goal as a board though, because it is exactly what we're trying to do when we do surveys. It's
Right.
exactly what we do when we try to engage our community members and hear their opinions. We want to do those, and that is in support of this very thing.
Okay.
So I think it's a very meaningful part of what we need to do as a group.
Okay.
And you gotta, unfortunately, or fortunately,
But that
you have
doesn't
to have that relationship, whether you want it or not.
It's not having the relationship. It's really, is it a goal, or is it just sort of part of the
Process.
process? Thank you. Yeah, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it.
Yeah. I think
For heaven's
it,
sake, to all of you listening to this recording.
but we've been on the board long enough to know that there's just those certain individuals of the community that sometimes influence us in somewhat of a negative way of saying, I really want to hear from those nut jobs.
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying.
But I mean, it's like, but I think as a whole, I think it's an important part that people know that's what we're doing. We're wanting to reach out.
Fair enough.
I look at it from
Anything
a very
else-
positive way like that.
Anything else that we would want to take off or add before we get into the specific language of these goals?
In terms of the specific language, I don't want to beat a dead horse.
Well, wait, before we get into the specific language, do you want to take something off or put something on?
I want to advocate for keeping anti-racist, anti-biased. I think
Okay,
in a
that's
tactful,
that's the word versus-
I think in a tactful environment, my daughter finds a swastika and it's swept under the rug. In an anti-racist, anti-biased school,
I'm with you, Christine. Do we want to add anything to the list?
add anything.
Okay, do you
Yeah.
want to take anything off the list? No. Does anybody else? Okay, now, go.
Now we're.
Oh, wait, you want?
Well, I just have a question, and this probably gets into what is the district strategic plan? I mean, this is kind of plan for what?
Well,
Is it-
Well, that's why I
Is that
said
the CSIP?
revisit versus complete. I mean,
Okay.
complete sounds like as if we don't even have a start,
I
but we
said
do
review and
have.
revise.
Yeah.
Right? We
But
do
we-
have one.
But what we want to do is engage in a process this year that we redevelop a new one. Which is another, again, it's a lengthy process. It's going to make for a full year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A plan for what? I
Just
guess
kinda-
I'm asking.
Just kind of where do you want to, what goals do you want to accomplish in, in the near-term future?
Correct me if I'm wrong, what these listed are actually part of the strategic plan.
Yeah.
They probably will
That's,
be.
I guess that's what I'm asking, is why is that?
I think it's the CSIP that we learned about
Yeah.
in our training.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And so engaging in a process that year that kind of re-examines, redevelops ours, my opinion, it narrows it, it focuses it more. Yeah, some of these same elements may be a part of it. Yeah.
Okay, so then with regard to the language.
I don't have a problem with leaving it the way it is worded because of just what Christine said. I thought it was, the more specific you get, we could have anti about 6 different things there. That's why I thought bias-free might encompass all of those. But if you think that's too mamby-pamby of a word, which, and it could be, then and it's not as directed as what it.
Equitable bias-free.
Yeah, I have no problem, because I don't mind something being hard-hitting. First of all, I think it sends a message that we really take it seriously. But second of all, it really promotes action. It really promotes to say, hey, we were faced with this, we did this. It may not have been 100% positively reviewed by 1 or 2 people, but if 800 people said, yes, you did the right things, I'm okay with that, but it promotes an action.
So do you want to leave it exactly as is, or are you proposing any changes to the language?
You're specifically talking about number 4?
Yeah.
I don't remember if I heard what else had been talked about with that one, but when I was listening to Sandy, I heard safe environment. I heard safe as part of that. As part of what, everybody thinks of safe as something different, but.
Create a safe environment, which will be anti-racist, anti-biased, child-friendly.
Yeah, maybe.
I do like I like the use of the word safe.
Well, each one of these are going to have steps underneath.
Some will be similar, but yeah, there's going to be.
Kind of a click on if you want to learn more, and then boop, bullet points pop up under each one kind of approach. And that's where your more specific goals, such as opportunities, such as, anything that you want to do that are specific action items to reach that goal, fall with it, in the bullet points below.
Some of you, when reading this, that we are racist or biased. Demonstrating a commitment to creating something doesn't create it. You either need to create it or not create it.
So demonstrate to, just to create a.
Or which
these are
means
things
we
we're
haven't done it
gonna
already.
do.
Pardon me?
These are things we're saying we will do this year.
Continue to, because there has been steps made to
Right.
do this. It's not like we've never done it before. But continue to,
To replace the words demonstrate a commitment. To
Yeah.
continue to create.
I wouldn't even say
You-
create,
You
continue
want
to,
replace create. is
Yeah, I don't
what
like
you
create.
want.
Promote
Okay.
and anti-racist, anti-bias, challenging.
promote works
support.
better than create, support, yeah.
Demonstrate a commitment to an anti-racist, anti-bias.
See, to me,
and
I
safe
can have a
environment.
commitment to something, but not do it.
Yeah, I think he's saying
I wanna
actually
see
create.
Action. Okay.
I want to see that stuff happen. I don't want to talk about it.
Well, I think that's where though, I guess when I wrote it, the actions comes through the demonstration of the commitment, not just the commitment. That make sense?
Demonstrate being the action.
But the action is demonstrating a commitment. I can demonstrate a commitment to mowing the lawn, but never mow the lawn.
How
I
do you
can get the
demonstrate?
lawnmower out of the garage. I can fill the lawnmower up with gasoline, but never mow the lawn.
I think what I hear Arnold
Does
saying.
that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Gene.
Yeah, I almost said earlier, where's Jean in her wordsmithing?
Wordsmither. I'm fine with whatever.
If you,
Not fine with whatever, but.
well, if you take create out, you're demonstrating a commitment to an anti-racist, anti-bias, challenging, and
Yeah.
supportive. Just take create out.
Yeah.
Is that what I kind of hear you saying?
Yeah, I just don't like the word demonstrate or create.
Continue to support a safe learning environment that is anti-racist,
Yeah.
anti-biased,
Yeah, that
challenging.
sounds fine.
Oh, that sounds good.
What was that? Sorry.
Continue to support a safe learning environment that is anti-racist, anti-biased, challenging, and supportive for all students.
Yeah, because what Arnold said is we have made efforts. It's just, we haven't found the perfect salve for the whole wound yet, so.
So does that sound okay?
That sounds good.
Somebody taking good notes?
Sorry, I keep jostling the table, I keep hitting my wheels on
Can you
the.
say that again?
Continue to support a safe learning environment that is anti-racist, anti-biased, challenging, and supportive for all students, supportive of all students.
Okay.
All right, any others?
And is this?
I really like the professional development one. I'm really glad you added that because I might not have thought to, and I think it's important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
I think the rest of them look good.
Can you say your header one more time?
Yeah.
To promote?
And nurture an academic
Okay,
community
okay.
where all students are learning every day.
It's amazing how bad my handwriting is. That's why I type usually.
Okay, we ready to move on to John Schools? Quick.
And I'm okay with the
One
words.
small thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Instead of saying continue to support, could it just say support? Like, continue to support tells me that we're not doing anything different.
I don't have a problem with it.
How is support any different? It still doesn't say you're doing anything different.
That's true.
I think we just
I
gotta
think
show
you
that
added
we've
it
been
to
doing
acknowledge that
something.
we've been doing something.
It'll be the actions instead of something different. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So these were the ones that I drafted, again, based on, you know, what I heard based on feedback I'd gotten during my evaluation, as well as thought on myself or some of the district work ahead. I don't always see that superintendent and board goals should be that different from one another.
Shouldn't be.
So I'm okay also just having your goals be my goals.
Well, but we need to measure yours. I mean, we need to measure ours too, but when we go to do the evaluation, I think that's sort of what we ran into this year. We were like, wait, was he actually supposed to have accomplished this, or was he supposed to be working on it?
Yeah. So the first one, again,
one's
came
pretty
from my
measurable.
evaluation. The second one came from kind of the discussion about that one board meeting about the academic challenge piece.
And I would like to know what you envision that looking like.
Well, I haven't even talked to Kristen since that meeting since she's been out. But I see that as what's a lot of the different development and support we're providing for teachers and staff and possibly families to help stretch all kids. And I think there'll be a quantitative component to evaluating that, but I do think there's largely going to be a qualitative surveying kids to feel if they're,
But your deliverable is a plan, right?
my deliverable is a plan. I could put in there with a focus on.
I'm not judging it, I'm just asking.
Yeah. No, my deliverable is a plan. Obviously, you gotta see growth. But I just haven't created what that survey looks like, and I just feel like it's largely gonna be a survey. And so it kind of goes to that not pre-August, obviously, but fall to spring, maybe assessment, late fall to spring assessment, what we're seeing. It's hard from a superintendent. You're gonna, again, we've got designs and a lot of PD and a lot of support in place already.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what necessarily, other than attention monitoring and as such, certainly thinking through new strategies, but from fall to spring.
I have a suggestion on this, just to
Please,
kind of,
please.
I'm just going to take an area like attendance, okay? While attendance is good, attendance can always be better.
Sure.
And for some students, it's really not that good. So if kids can't learn if they're not in school,
Sure.
so if you enhance the attendance, the follow-through is that they should learn a little bit better.
Yeah.
Maybe not. But, so how can attendance be improved? Are secretaries or principals calling people who are not at school and saying, do you know your child's not at school? Because that was something that was in the survey too. Or what are we doing to enhance attendance at school? So kids who are maybe have an 80% attendance rate get a 90% attendance rate, or kids who have a 90% attendance rate have a 95% attendance rate. So that just one kind of thing.
Yeah.
There was something I was thinking about too related to that over the past year that I think was worse than it has ever been, which is that there were populations that were unhealthy where a huge number of students were out, right? So in addition to it being things like this, could it be like cleanliness or?
Hickson got hit hard by the
Right.
flu.
I think that was all over St. Louis, and I think that's just,
It's true.
it's the flu.
Well, and it's,
Despite your best
being
efforts.
proactive and wiping down doorknobs and
Right.
doing all that and wiping desks down ahead of time,
Right.
or, not reacting, but being proactive. But that kind of goes with that, but I was just thinking
Yeah.
about how is that achieved and what other kind of metrics are out there to kind of give some data or give some kind of information.
I'll have to develop something. What are the metrics to evaluate it?
I guess what do you want to be able to point us to show this is what I've done in furtherance of this goal?
In terms of the challenge?
In terms of, if your goal is develop and implement a plan designed to support the,
I see it as our goal as a, not that our goal is that narrow, just to support the academic challenge, but I see it as something that we should be striving to do all the time. So I think, certainly there's a recognition that all kids are not being challenged. You see it in your own kids. So I think being explicit with that as a focus and priority for the district community, and these are district-wide, demonstrating district-wide commitment, development, support, making it present in conversations with, at the school level, at the classroom level, making sure parents understand it, and then again, highlighting strategies that are in place. How do we hone it? How do we support the development of teachers? And I guess having to develop what are the metrics that we're going to use to determine it. And I think there are some metrics that we can use quantitatively, but I think ultimately, you're going to need to ask Addison, are you being challenged? John and Stephanie, do you feel your kids being challenged at school?
I feel like you need a resource when they say no, and they've gone to the teacher.
Yeah.
Then they need a resource that they can, or someone that they can go to.
Yeah.
Or even before that, if the teacher recognizes that that student's not being challenged, to go to that student and say, how can I challenge you in a different way?
Right.
Rather than have, I'd rather see that. I understand what you're saying.
Well, I think the communication of it, because I feel like, again, that's happened for Addison. Hasn't always happened for Addison. So we design, development that we provide teachers or resources that we provide teachers include elements for how to. So it does come to, a lot of times the teacher level, and certainly through the support of people, not being on an island themselves, of how well are they doing at being able to challenging the child, So.
Maybe I'm just being dense, and I'm not trying to belabor the point, but
Yeah.
I still don't know what you're gonna, like, in April, when we say, has John done this, what are we gonna look at?
I would say, has that communication been present? Like, is the commitment to challenging kids known? And again, I wouldn't want to be judged just based on where the children qualitatively score themselves, but if we have something in place that where they're contributing feedback among it is something related to their challenge, I think that's something. Certainly, again, having a development of maybe measures or an evaluation system for assessing things, including, maybe not exclusively, but including the academic challenge. And then there would be an expectation that those would be initial measures that, if things are being done effectively, should show, maybe not immediately, but in the not too distant term, performance elements on more standardized measures or different things going up.
How do we know our kids have learned from day one to last day anything? How do we know that?
Well, I hope the teachers know that. They report on that to parents.
Okay. How else do we know that?
What's that?
How else do we know that, or would we know that?
All the different assessments that they take, reading levels, NWEA stuff, map testing. Again, map testing, those may not, the NWEA shows growth, obviously. Reading levels show.
That's kind of product what Keita was talking about being able to take tests and being able to, not take tests. And there are a variety of things.
Yes.
But and I guess it's having also kids reflect on how do you know that you've actually done something here?
Yeah.
That you've learned something, rather than sit around and twiddle thumbs for a year.
Yeah.
Because we can get the quantifiable data, but we don't normally get the quantifiable data to a level that, other than to form just some general opinions about an overall group,
Right.
whether, so it's hard to measure
Well, you got
that with regards to a specific goal of yours.
Yeah. We look at Amy's, recent graduates, if they didn't take some standardized measure, the teachers should be able to tell Amy, or the kids should be able to talk about how they grew or what Holly learned in, marketing 2 class or stuff like that, but that would not necessarily be something that I would be.
John, if it says, if it says develop and implement a plan designed to support the blah, 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 isn't the measure whether or not there's a plan?
Yeah, that's what I tried.
Well, that's, yeah.
The
Yeah.
problem is that with learning is, I think, how much you learn depends a lot on what teacher you have. Kids know which classes to take, which ones you can do nothing and get by, and which ones you're going to have to work really hard and presumably be forced to learn.
Which is really incumbent upon the staff member to really give it all the time. And not just go through emotion.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of going through the motions.
Well, I think this was written as the plan, but I was kind of going back to what Arnold was saying of like, well, you can create a plan. But what are you looking at to determine whether the plan had any effect or not? So that's why I was saying.
She didn't do it. I planned to, I just didn't get to the checklist.
Well, yeah, Emerson used to, there was some language I used back in the CNI days about explore. He's like, does that explore mean you going like this? And, but so my thought was to, again, have some type of plan that has some type of evaluation system. If it can be completed sooner rather than later, having some kind of assessment that shows from sometime first semester to second semester. I know it's different classes at the high school level for a lot of the kids, but having that serve as an evaluation. That's a big deal. When you talk about kids learning, I mean, there's not a number, and it's not like. So
I was gonna say, I mean, I have a unique situation being at Givens where all 3 of my kids have had the same teachers.
Yeah.
I'm literally getting 3 different results.
Really?
Even though I'm seeing the same projects being assigned, and there's 3 different. So some of that's the teacher, maybe. But a lot of it is also my
You can't
kids.
make somebody learn
and
that
they're-
doesn't want to learn either.
Right. There's this one, I know this one is going to do this, I know this one's going to do that, and that one's maybe. So that's, again, you get down to the kids and
I think
how
that,
are they challenged and how are they.
I don't want to interrupt you.
No, I'm
but-
done.
No, I was, and I think that the quantifier here is, or the line delineation is you developing a plan versus us evaluating the quality or the level of depth of that plan or measurability of that plan. Having the plan is the goal.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to do a good plan.
Well, no. I'm not.
Don't do a
yeah.
bad plan.
No. Oh, yeah. You're going to do a good plan, John. You're going to do a good plan. We know that.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's there
Yeah.
to be looked at and evaluated is the goal.
Yeah.
Do you want a goal, do you think you should have a goal related to equity? That was a neutral question, I'm only asking.
Yeah.
Is that part of the challenge of all students?
Yeah. I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
Probably change that last one consistent with the board policy, review and revision of the strategic plan instead of development.
The one that's at the top of the next page.
Yeah, the top of the
Yeah.
next page.
It's hiding.
So when we say review and revision of the strategic plan, are we okay going through a process again? Or would you rather we did something?
What were you?
Well, I was thinking a process.
Yeah.
I think part of the process is the revisiting of what we already have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's again, it's going to be a full year. Got all kinds of energy right now in July. But again,
Well, July ends up tomorrow, so just
trying to
close
streamline
up.
it. I think I'm excited about it, but yeah. Okay, we'll change that language.
All right. Anything else on board goals? All right, we're anyone like to?
Well, with regards to this, before we look for the motion, the JGK5 that we pulled out, are we going to discuss
We'll
that?
do it the next meeting.
Okay, that's going to be a next meeting
Next
thing
meeting,
versus,
yeah.
okay, perfect.
Yeah, because I had a feeling we might be crunched for time. So.
Okay, then I make a motion that we approve consent agenda items 3.02 and the revised 3.03 and 3.04 and 3.05.
Second. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, and then we'll need a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing legal matters.
So moved?
Second. Roll call, please. Steve?
Yes.
Christine?
Yes?
Joe?
Yep.
Amy, yes? Keita?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it necessary to close the doors?
Recorded.
All right, go for it. Motion for adjournment?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.